Okay, that is preparing to go. So I'm going to go ahead and just welcome everyone here. Good evening. Welcome to this evening's presentation. My name is Judy Kitt. I'm the current president of the Foundation for Mind Being Research, known as FMBR. I know that some of you are new to us, and so I just want to let you know that FMBR was founded 40 years ago by scientists and artists and healers who were interested in exploring the nature of human consciousness through the lens of science and spirituality and ancient wisdom traditions. We're among a growing group of organizations who are helping to create a cultural shift away from exclusively reductionist approaches to science, so that we can really have a fuller understanding of the range of human experience and the nature of reality. I encourage you to check us out at fmbr.org. And you can also check out all of our past presentations on our YouTube channel at FMBR TV. That's on YouTube. And so for the logistics for this meeting is set up webinar style, which means that Grant and I can't see you. If you'd like to ask a question and you're on Zoom, you can click on the participants link on the bottom of your screen. At the bottom of the list of participants, there's a button that says raise hand. And if you want to click on that, I'll see that you've raised your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask your question directly. When it's time for questions, I'll do that. And you can also ask questions by typing them into the chat box. And if you're watching the live stream on YouTube, you can type questions into the comment section and Mary and I will monitor them and ask them for you. So we're very honored to have Grant Cameron with us tonight. Many of you will know Grant from seeing him on television documentaries about UFOs, or maybe you've heard him on Coast to Coast AM or hundreds of other radio shows. Grant's been researching the UFO phenomenon for over 4 decades. In Canada, the United States, he was one of the 40 witnesses that testified in front of 6 ex-senators and congressmen in Washington for the Citizens Hearing on UFO Disclosure. After experiencing a noetic download event on February 26, 2012, Cameron turned his research interests away from nuts and bolts research to the role of consciousness in UFO phenomena. This new research has expanded out to the possible involvement of extraterrestrials in modern music, and into the phenomena of inspirations and downloads in scientific discoveries, inventions, Nobel Prizes, music, art, books, near-death experiences, meditation, and with individuals known as savants and prodigies. So Grant, welcome. We're really honored to have you with us here tonight. I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us.
Well, thanks, Judy, for having me. Usually I do the UFO crowd. I'm always proud to move across because, as you mentioned, I had the noetic download in 2012, and I was sort of cut loose by a large percentage of the UFO community because your side is sort of considered like the woo-woo people, and a lot of ufologists want to consider themselves skeptical, nuts and bolts, rational analytical types. So when I sort of made this move away, I was basically cut loose by a lot of people. A lot of people don't talk to me anymore. But as you mentioned, I had a noetic download experience that came with absolute certainty, and I had the answer I've been looking for since 1975. So I've been on this path, and I'm kind of happy to give a lecture to a non-UFO crowd. One thing I would sort of point out is that I think a lot of the people in the paranormal field really think the UFO people are sort of out to lunch, and the UFO people think the paranormal people are sort of out to lunch, woo-woo people. And science fiction doesn't get along with UFO people. So I'm sort of one that has straddled. And if you look at, I have a YouTube site where I interview a lot of people, and you'll see the sort of the split there. When I do stuff like government cover up on UFOs, I can get up to 125,000 hits. When I do something on consciousness, it'll be down around 2,000, 3,000. I just did an interview with Eben Alexander. I do most of my stuff now. I do is consciousness, and a lot of people warn me. They said your numbers are falling off, and I said, get ready. If it goes to 0, I'm going to keep doing it because this is where it's at, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So I want to just do a little PowerPoint presentation for about an hour. What I've done, I've written so many books on this since 2012 that I can only sort of touch the surface. I can't really bring you into all the stuff that I've done in terms of research on this. But to sort of give you a flavor of the things that I've worked on after I realized that UFOs was not the answer. It's part of a mystery. But the bottom line to this whole thing is consciousness. And so I'll give you an idea of how a UFO researcher ended up in a field where basically now I just interview people who are experiencers, consciousness people, and down that road. And I'll try to get across to you what I've been doing. Okay, so I can do my PowerPoint now?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay. So we're going to share, and we're going to go to, this is the right presentation here. No, this is the presentation for tomorrow. Hang on. I get the right one here. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, it's full screen? Okay.
It's not full screen.
No. Okay, hang on, let me get it to go full screen here. Let me cut off this display settings. So you can see my second slide? No, you shouldn't be able to see that.
Yeah, I can see a lovely couple.
Okay. Well, let me just go through it, and you can follow the slides there. What this guy is, this is a story that is just broken. This guy here his name is Chris Peters. His father is John Peters, who was the former head of Columbia Pictures. His stepmother is Barbara Streisand. His mother is an Academy Award-winning nominated actress. He's been involved with assistant producer on movies like The Color Purple, Rain Man, Batman, and all these sort of things. He's an experiencer. I've been in contact with him for 3 years, and he has now just gone public. So I'm doing an interview with him on Sunday. This girl beside him is Desta, who is my assistant, and we're going to detail his story. He had an experience, this would be about 3 years ago. He had an encounter, and when you see his story, you're going to see that UFOs are not aliens the way people think they are. I've actually moved away and said, the more I look at it, the more I think this is not going to be as extraterrestrial as people think it is. When you hear his story, he starts talking about angels. He starts talking about God. He talks experiences happening almost every day. He talks about getting an experience where he has this bizarre thing that just sort of rattles him, this thing sitting over top of the house. And he says, well, if you're an alien or whatever you are, put something in my head that I don't already know. And he gets in his head a word, biocentrism. And he has no idea what it means. He goes home and he looks it up. And if you look, you'll see it's a term that was sort of invented by a guy named Dr. Robert Lanza, who's considered, I think in 2014, one of the top 100 scientists, important people in the world. He's a scientist who talks about the fact that biology is central to the universe. He's written Biocentrism and Beyond Biocentrism. So Chris went down that road. He's doing a documentary on consciousness. But he's a very high level person who's now just come forward. And there's more and more of these people all the time who are coming forward to describe the fact that they are also having these experiences. And I was just listening to a podcast before I came here. I was on a walk, and I heard a podcast that was describing that 56% of all philosophers today are materialists, which may seem like an awful lot, but I've been in this game a long time. And even 25 years ago, if you know the story of Jill Bolte Taylor, who had a left brain hemorrhage and suddenly was in the middle of the universe, and her left brain shut down, and she was one with the universe and all this kind of stuff. She was not allowed to talk about consciousness. Consciousness used to be, if you're a philosopher, if you said you were not a materialist, they would get out the cross and the nails. Now it's down to 56%. And what you see now in the world is that the consciousness is starting to take hold, that people are starting to realize there's something to this whole consciousness thing. I started, as a lot of people in the UFO community know, I started within a sighting. This is an object called Charlie Red Star. This is May of 1975. I have no interest in UFOs. I have no interest in anything of the sort. I'd never thought of extraterrestrial life. I was interested in Edgar Cayce. I was interested in weird type stuff, but I had no interest in extraterrestrials. The only reason I went out to this small town was that people were seeing an object in this town. And I said, well, I should go out there and we should see, maybe I'll buy the lottery ticket. I know I'm not going to win anything, but let's buy the lottery ticket to see what happens. And what I saw was not a light in the sky. What I saw was an object that flew in front of the car. And I was going to university at the time. I had a political studies major, religion as a minor, and I literally fell off the edge of the earth. I could not believe that I had seen this thing. And so what I had seen was not just a light in the sky, it was an actual object. The second night, when we went out, I dragged all my friends out there. The second night, the thing came right at me. And years later, I realized this is probably not random. This was intended to be, and because the rest of my friends all just went on with their life, I fell off the edge of the earth. And the second night was the more important night than the first night. The first night confirmed to me, yeah, there's a phenomena. This is for real. And a lot of UFO researchers are still trying to go round and around the tree to prove the tree is there. I knew from the square one that this was for real. The second night when I saw it, it came directly at us, very low to the ground, came in very close, and then made a left-hand turn and flew off into the northeast. And I remember looking at it and saying, that may be an extraterrestrial. I said, that is just unreal. And then I thought, but what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It was just sort of flying away. It wasn't doing anything. And that always haunted me, that thing, like, what is actually going on here? And so I started this pursuit that started in 1975 of trying to find out who knew what I had seen. I figured I'm not that smart a guy. I don't have that big education and stuff like that. But somebody on this world's got to know what the heck that thing was that I saw. So I started the pursuit. I went to the Canadian government. I went to the former president of Penn State University, who had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, and did engineering studies for Eisenhower, and had co-developed the homing torpedo. I went after these very high-level people that I thought would know the answer, and a lot of them did know the answer, but they didn't want to talk. I couldn't find any documents at the presidential libraries. That's where I finally ended up, going to the presidential libraries. And I was very depressed until 2012. I was in a lecture with Colin Andrews, and that's when I had this noetic download experience, which I'll describe in a minute, where it came into my head, and it's what I call a contact modality. The modality that I used two of them. The one that I got there was a daydream state. So when you're in a lecture where you really don't want to be involved and you're sort of daydreaming and not really thinking about what the person's talking about, you're not interested. I was not interested in crop circles, which was the discussion, and my mind was wandering, and it came into my head instantaneously. And this is a process where I believe people get into the field, and what you do is you can go through all the thought and the work and gather all the material, but it's not until you actually relax and get into a theta state, until you shut down the rational, analytical left brain that's yakking away and talking. The minute you can shut it down, you can go into the field. And that's what happened to me. I was daydreaming. I was just thinking about doing other stuff. And that led me on this pursuit that I knew for a fact. And if you're near the Ions Institute there, you know, with a noetic experience, it comes with a degree of absolute certainty. There was no doubt about this. I knew this is how it worked. It was not a good idea. I knew for a fact that consciousness was the basis of this whole thing. And I had the answer to what I've been looking for since 1975 on the second night. So I wrote this book, and the book was actually by somebody who optioned the movie. I had no interest in anymore in UFOs. If it hadn't been for a woman who optioned my story for a movie, the book would never have gotten written. She pushed the book through. We got it published a couple of years ago. That tells a story, and I really don't try to sell the book. I'm really not interested. It tells a story of all these people. And what I did is I went and gathered all these people who had seen these sightings and stuff, and I went out and I tried to get the book published, and nobody could care less. The local publisher in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where I am, said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it, that she could not have cared less. And that's what my impression of UFO sightings. You can talk about UFO sightings until Jesus walks down Fifth Avenue, and it's not going to solve anything. It's not until you actually talk to the people who are interacting with the people who are interacting with the intelligence behind the phenomena that you're going to figure out what's going on. We can prove UFOs exist over and over again. The mass majority of the UFO community is still into trying to prove UFOs exist. I knew from day one that it was for real. So I was able to go on and try to figure out what is actually going on. Who are the people inside the craft? What is this intelligence? Why are they here? And what message might they have for us? So I wrote all these high-level books on government cover-up. Some of them sold a lot. I wrote this book called Managing Magic, which talks about how the government is controlling, and I believe they are leaking pieces of the UFO material. But the main thing that they have some concept of, this consciousness aspect to it, they are not talking about. They are leaking elements of hardware, but you can have all the hardware you want, as I'll explain. You can have bodies, you can have crafts, you can have whatever you want. You are still not going to understand how this thing works because it has a very heavy component of consciousness. So you can have the craft and you cannot turn it on. It's like your cell phone. You need your fingerprint to turn on your cell phone. It's the same idea. You need consciousness to turn on the machine. I did some of these books and I had some bizarre experiences in my life in terms of getting messages. One was a message I got from an alien, which came across a cell phone from that same girl that Desta Barnaby that was in this first slide that I showed. We were going, a woman from California wanted me to go to Mount Shasta, sit on the side of a mountain and meditate for world peace. I said, Katerina, I have no problem with meditating for world peace. I have nothing against meditation or world peace, but I don't think I want to drive 3 days from Winnipeg to sit on the side of a mountain. So basically, she kept bugging me and she'd help me edit some of my self-published books. So I said, okay, Katerina, I'll come there and I'll sit on the mountain and we'll meditate for world peace. There was 150 people there, most of them from South America, from Mexico, from California, all Latinos. I had no idea what was going on. It was all in Spanish. And at 9:33, exactly when these people said this thing would appear, it appeared over my head. And again, I was sold. And this had this idea that these people were using meditation. They were using mantras. They were raising vibration to make contact with these beings. And they really got me the idea that, yeah, there are people who can actually interact with this phenomena, and it has to do with consciousness. So I wrote that book, and then I wrote another book about a 2019 event where I went to, or actually it's backwards. The first book is 2019. This book is about 2017 when I got the message that came across his cell phone. And I said I'd already gotten a message about the music book, which I'll describe in a minute, but I'd already got a message from an alien and I knew that turned into a book. So when this message came across, when it was coming that there was this message from Antarel, this alien, a message for me, I said, get the message. What exactly is the message? Get exactly what this guy's saying. Because I knew that there's a possibility that this thing was true. So I wrote a book called Portals and UFOs at Mount Shasta. What I'm maintaining now is that the government has some knowledge of what's going on, but the knowledge that I believe they have really doesn't have much to do with nuts and bolts, anti-gravity, all this kind of stuff. If they have technology, I do believe that the government understands the idea of portals, because that's how I believe they're getting here. The basic message is it's all one thing. All time and space is connected. There is no time and space. It's all one thing. And they are moving through these portals. They're coming from one place to another instantaneously through time. And I do believe, and in this book, I talk about what I know about what the government people that I've followed, because what I did is I tried to find the highest level people that I could that knew what was going on. And I kept getting indications that there was some truth to this portal thing, that they have some understanding about how portals work, and that this is how this technology is working. They're coming in through these sort of interdimensional gateways, and that these Mission Rama people who go up on the mountain, they know how this works, and they were able to open a number of these portals, which they called Zendros, and interact with the beings that were in there. And I interviewed a bunch of the people who were in the Zendros, and they all described exactly what they saw inside the Zendra, this being and all sorts of stuff. And again, I was sold. But again, I had this idea of consciousness. So I started to write these books about consciousness and the connection to making interaction with the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena. This is just one of the books that's upcoming. This is a study that was done. It was an eyes-only study. Most people don't know about this. It was done for President Johnson. The guy who was writing the manuscript on the study, because there are no documents, it's an eyes-only study, so there are no documents, was writing about this study. He died. It went to his daughter. They contacted me because I'm the presidential guy as to what does the president know. And what I can tell you from this, it'll be a future book, basically said the president doesn't know anything. And that's, I think, is a lot of the truth. They know UFOs exist, but beyond that, they really don't understand very much at all. So Johnson was actually, that's what it was in the final conclusion to the study that was done for President Johnson. Yes, UFOs exist, and we're studying it, and it's unidentified. And beyond that, we really don't have that much knowledge. Now, here's the two downloads I had. First one was 2012, watching this experience when I was in the this lecture in Phoenix, Arizona. And I do a book where I actually talk about a bunch of downloads that people had. So when I had my download, I started to look around. I started to realize that this is not that uncommon. For example, you have all the books of Harry Potter. If you've seen the Oprah interview with the girl who wrote all the Harry Potter books, she talks about being on a train going in from Manchester into London. She falls asleep on the train and she wakes up and the books are coming into her head, all the names, all the places, everything is downloading into her head. And she said, and they didn't have a piece of paper, and I'm madly trying to figure out how am I going to remember all this stuff. And even the last line in the last 7th book was actually given to her. I realized that Paul McCartney had gotten this, the most produced song of the 20th century yesterday that he wrote. He came in the middle of a dream and he got up, and these aren't ordinary dreams. When musicians get songs, they come exactly as they are. There's no weird stuff. They're just transposing what they hear in their dream. And so Paul McCartney took the song yesterday and he ran around to people for a month and he played it to them because he figured someone for sure had written this thing. So I started looking. I realized there are these download experiences all over the place, and I got very, 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 very excited about this whole thing. And then in 2017, I had a much more dramatic download experience, which happened about this time of the year. It was fairly cold. I had my gloves on, and I was walking. Again, this is like a sort of a meditation, a walking meditation, a daydreaming thing where I'll walk for 6, 10, 12 miles a day, maybe even more than that. And while I'm walking, I'll just zone out, and these ideas will come. And this one in 2017, the one in 2012 had 3 elements to it. The 2012, these are ideas that I already had. It wasn't that anything new came into my head, but the 2012 one basically gave me a line from a document from 2012 that I already knew. And it took these 3 pieces and put them together, instantaneously together. And I went, oh, that's how it works. All these pieces are put together. The first piece was a document from 1950. The Canadian government, I chased the Canadian government, and the Canadian government had written a top secret document which said UFOs exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, who was the sort of the technological czar during World War II for the American government. It's of tremendous significance to the Americans, and we were also told by the Americans that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. The Americans are doing very well because they said, if we're working on it, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. The reason that's important is because nobody in 1950 had talked to an alien. The first alien contact did not take place till a couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952. Nobody's talking to aliens. So the question was, how did the Americans know to tell the Canadians that mental phenomena was involved in the UFO phenomena? So that was one piece. The second was we chased this former president of Penn State University. And at one point, we were asking him about the cover-up. Dr. Walker, are there just 12 people that are running this show, and are they all still just Americans, or is this an international group? He said, look, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? This is 1991. What do you know about ESP? The guy that was interviewing me, he said, I really don't know. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. Then in 1993 at UCLA, Ben Rich, who is the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, which is known to be the back engineering company that back engineers UFO technology, was giving a lecture. At the end of the lecture, he gave a statement. He said, we now have the technology to take ET home. We've discovered the mistake in the equation, and it's not going to take a lifetime to do. One of the people in the thing was an engineer. He had had an experience at 9 years old with a flying saucer in his backyard with his brother. He had been fascinated his whole life with propulsion. He went to Ben Rich. He said, Ben, I need to know. I have been fascinated my whole life. Ben, I need to know. How do they get here? How does it work? How does the propulsion system work? And Ben turned around and he said exactly what Walker had said 2 years before. He said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Harson, the engineer, said, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben Rich said, that's how it works. Turned around and walked out the door. So these 3 things came together. Consciousness is how it works. It was absolutely for certain. In 2017, I have an experience with 24 things. And it basically gave me a bunch of stuff. And it basically came down again to this idea that consciousness is primary. And you will see a lot of people like Max Planck, here's the guy, the father of quantum physics, talking about, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. Now, this kind of stuff, the nuts and bolts people in ufology hate. They believe nuts and bolts are primary and the consciousness comes off of nuts and bolts. It's the other way around. Consciousness is primary. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing postulates consciousness. So when I give UFO lectures, I hammer this home. And there was a bunch of quantum physicists at the very beginning all talked about the same thing, that consciousness is primary. Unless we understand that, we just go off the rails. We cannot understand how reality works unless we realize it's all ooey stuff. Consciousness is primary. Now, it led into 2017 thing led me to this idea where I realized that there was different modalities. There were different ways to get in. So what I did is I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. I was asked to write a book, a paper for a book that was coming out on contact modalities. And they knew that I'd had a number of these, I'd worked on this, and I really didn't get the article going. So that at one point I said, oh, I got to get this article going. I'll write all the contact modalities I can think. I came up with over 70 different contact modalities. So basically, whether you're reading cards or being a medium or channeling, or whether you're talking to aliens, or whether you're doing near-death experience or out-of-body experience, or drumming, or dancing, or in a float tank, or whatever you're doing, it's all just permission slips. It's just all the same thing. You're just using a different modality. And unlike music, there are people who can play music, and then there are musical prodigies, and there are professional musicians. Because you have a modality doesn't mean they're all equal. There are people who are better at it. So what I did is I put all these modalities back, and a lot of this is actually online. I put the first half of the book on there, which describes my theory, where I go through the theory of consciousness, neurology, how this works, how it worked with me, the different modalities. And then we go through the modalities, and I give examples of people talking to dead people and people who are channeling and all this kind of stuff, and basically show that all it is the ability to shut down the rational analytical mind, to shut down the monkey mind, Mr. Stupid, whatever you want to call it, shut that down, and then you can pop into the field. You are able to pop in to get into the theta state, to shut down the sort of the alpha, get into the theta, and you go into this, and there's all sorts of modalities for doing it. This is sort of the part of the book that's on. I talk about all the different, my understanding of neurology, and I bring up a lot of stuff that sort of backs up this theory that there are actually two brains. There are actually more than two brains. There are thousands or potentially millions of brain modules that are all independent, but are all working together like cells in the human body. And that is the number one message, I believe, of the aliens. I believe it's the number one message of psychedelics. I believe it's the number one message of everything in the paranormal is oneness. It's all one, it's all alive, and it's all connected. So oneness is the basic rule. And I go through this whole deal that the mind is working as one. All these modules are working together. So if I ask you to meditate, everybody's going to do a different type of meditation. And the question is, who's telling the brain to do, whether you're doing an awareness meditation or a gratitude meditation or whatever meditation you're doing, who's telling the brain to do it? There is a conductor of the orchestra of the millions of modules that all work together like the cells in the human body. And that's where we have the problem with my understanding of COVID, is that you have certain areas of the world where COVID, we have 6 areas in Canada that are completely under control, absolutely under control. We have some areas that only had their first case a couple of weeks ago. And it comes down to this idea that when the one is the most important thing, when you control the one and COVID's under control, when you go to individuals that everybody does whatever they want to do, then you have like 80 trillion human body cells that are all doing what they want to do, and the body gets sick. So it's this difference, which came in my 2017 download, which I'll get to. It comes down to this idea: is the universe one? Is it all one thing, or are we random biological robots floating around in a random meaningless universe? It's the difference between separation and oneness. This is where we get this idea about where do we get the knowledge from. So what people do, and I bring this up all the time, this is a quote by Einstein: you can't solve problems using the same kind of thinking that we use when we create them. A lot of what we do in science is we do that. We think we've got all the facts, and all we do is we shuffle the facts around, and we're using the same facts to try to solve the problem. You're not going to until you get some outside information that comes in. Here's William James, who is the father of American psychology. A great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. And that is true. You need new information to come in. And that's where this noetic field comes in, that people will bring in ideas, will bring in stuff from the field, and that's where you get new ideas. Now, there's a couple of ways to get the material. One is observation. So if we were back in 1492, the only reason we now believe that the world is not flat is because somebody went across the ocean and determined, no, it wasn't, and brought some new information into the equation. And then he got sort of, attacked by the skeptics. And eventually, as the expression goes, science and everything else advanced one funeral at a time. The idea that the world was round suddenly became accepted. Same as the sun goes around the earth, things are not solid. But in 1492, the rational analytical brain said, the world is flat. Don't tell me the world ain't flat. If it were round, everybody would fall off the bottom and the water would all run off the ball. Don't tell me. So that's what we do, is we take these ideas and we cycle these ideas, and we think that we're actually thinking when you need new information to come in to change. Until you get new information, all you're doing is recycling ideas. So this is Christopher Columbus brought that. The noetic material was the one that I didn't really realize. I didn't even know what noetic meant until a couple of years ago. I was calling them downloads, but William James actually described noetic, and it's actually more interesting. And of course, Edgar Mitchell, who had his own noetic experience, you probably are aware, he was coming back from the moon, and that was like mine, like the daydream experience, where he's sitting there and he's watching the Earth from space, and he suddenly gets the sort of samadhi experience where he's one with the universe, and he realizes everything's connected. It's all one thing, and he starts the Ions Institute. Now, noetic means meaning, inner wisdom, direct knowledge, intuition, or implicit understanding. And I've had these two very dramatic noetic experiences. I've had some minor ones, and I've had some and I won't get too much into. I'm doing an experiment now where I'm able to get in the field all the time. But the hardest thing that I've always had to try to explain to people about noetic, about download, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that it comes with absolute certainty. You know this is real. This is not a good idea. This is something, and psychedelics is one that people describe as the same thing. When I was there, or a near-death experience, or an out-of-body experience, when I talked to Eben Alexander last week, I know this is more real than the real world. I know this happened. I know this was real. And it comes with this inner wisdom. Like what you're being given is real material. You know that this is real. So this is the idea of noetic, that it's coming with this sort of direct knowledge that you're getting new material. This is not recycled material that other people are recycling. Our normal waking consciousness is but one special type of consciousness. This is another of the quantum physicists from the early 20th century. Is parted by the filmiest of screens. There lies potential forms of consciousness entirely different. No account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves other forms of consciousness quite disregarded. So this is the idea that there's waking consciousness, and then there's these other levels of consciousness that we can get into, and there are modalities, there are ways of doing it. So when I had my experience, I started to look at other people's downloads, and I wrote this book called Inspired: The Paranormal World of Creativity. And everybody thinks, well, everybody, these real smart guys, we have this belief that there's intelligence, and intelligence is how you invent things. It's like exactly the opposite. Intelligent people sometimes don't really discover anything. They're not very creative. It's people who are able to get in the field, and they usually aren't the smartest people around. So I wrote this book called Inspired, and I go through 13 Nobel Prizes. I go through many inventions, like I go through the hologram, the laser. Both of them were invented the same way that my download came. Both of them came sitting on a park bench. They'd gone through all the work. They had worked through all this stuff. They couldn't figure the thing out. And they were sitting there. One was waiting for a restaurant to open. The other guy was watching a tennis game. And suddenly, boom, it came into their head. You relax, you quiet the ego the left brain, the talking mind, and you allow it goes in, grabs the information, pulls it down. So I go through these type of inventions. I go through a lot of musicians. People don't realize I've got lists of 150 songs that came in dreams, songs that came instantaneously to people. And I go through all these different inventions, and I basically show that people are getting in the field and pulling a lot of this stuff and giving other people credit for it. This is Albert Einstein. Most people don't realize Albert Einstein got the theory of relativity from a dream. This is what he said about it. I knew I had to understand that dream. And you could say, and I would say, that my entire scientific career has been a meditation on my dream. Same with Niels Bohr, who had the quantum atom that came in a dream. The uncertainty principle by Heisenberg came walking in the middle of the night in a park behind the Bohr Institute. You see this over and over and over again. When you start looking at where these things came from, you realize that this stuff is being pulled out of the field. I wrote this book on music. This is the first time I got a message from an alien. I was with a guy in North Carolina who's a very major experiencer. He's got a lot of contact. The US government is watching him. The intelligence agencies are watching him. They're trying to figure out, how does he have this kind of intelligence with this alien intelligence? What's he doing? Is his brain different? This sort of thing. And I had a bizarre experience with him when I was in North Carolina with him. So I knew he was the real deal. And then about a year or two after that experience, he phoned me up and he said, Grant, I've got a message to you from the Guardians. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, they've got a message for you. I said, okay, what's the message? And he said, they want you to know the messages in the music. And I said, well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy. I don't listen to music. I'm not interested in music. My whole family's musical. I could care less about music. And he kept talking. He said, oh, wow, song you should listen to is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I'm like, whatever, Chris. And he just kept talking. And he said, oh, and the other one you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I went, Neil Young? This is a synchronicity thing that you'll see in all the paranormal fields. I went, Neil Young? Neil Young's involved in this? And he said, yeah, Neil Young's involved. I said, Neil Young grew up in Winnipeg. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. Nobody, even Canadians, don't come to Winnipeg to visit. I mean, it's like, and Neil Young grew up here. So I went, Neil Young's involved. And that led to the book on music. So I go through how many musicians are UFO experiencers claim they've been abducted. How many musicians like John Denver, who believed he was from another galaxy. John Denver believed he came from the constellation Lyra. There's piles of them. So I go through all the musicians that believe they had these things, where they got their songs, the download experiences they had, how they were afraid to put their name on the music because all they did was transpose the music. They didn't really invent the music. It came to them in a dream. It just came to them instantaneously. And the biggest songs of all times you'll see came that way. They're not B-side songs. They're some of the biggest songs of the 20th century. I do the contact modality book. That's a fairly lengthy book where I go through all the different modalities. Here's gifts. We go to the gifts that are given to people. Another modality I use is the shower. And I've always had trouble with the shower, because if you've had noetic experiences, you know that you better write them down right away, because they're like dreams. They slip away as fast as you can get them. I've had a lot in the shower where I'm going, I got to get out of here. I got to write. And I always keep a piece of paper with me and a pad. And I know enough to write stuff down. A lot of it I never read again once I write it down, but it's important to know that there are these different modalities. Now, here's where I start to get into this thing where people may not realize the significance between consciousness and UFOs. You see UFOs as nuts and bolts. There's these aliens that come up from another planet. They're here to abduct people and make babies and all this kind of stuff. And what you realize is, when I had my first experience in 2012, when I had this download experience, I gave my first consciousness lecture in Phoenix in 2013. I was contacted by the woman who was giving the lecture. She said, are you still going to talk to Pam Dupuy? And I said, oh, yeah, I'll talk to her. And I thought, well, I guess I must have agreed to talk to this woman. This woman was in her 70s. She came to a house where I was on the Monday after the lecture. And she said, what did Stacy tell you about me? I said, I don't know. I'm just supposed to talk to you. So that's good. She's walking in, starts talking. I'm a remote viewer. I've been abducted. I have this and that, just going on. And it's like, whatever. I've heard these stories 1,000 times. She kept talking. And at one point she says to me, I flew the craft. I said, you what? She said, I flew the craft. I said, you flew the craft? She said, yeah. I said, you flew the flying saucer? She said, yeah. I said, they let you fly the flying saucer? I was ready to tell her, okay, leave the house. You're crazy. I mean, get out of here. You're absolutely insane. And I said, they let you fly the flying saucer? Because the old deal is, like, if you're a woman from Saudi Arabia, until 2 years ago, you could not drive a car unless your husband or your brother was in the car with you. But if you're abducted by the aliens, I'm supposed to believe that they're going to left a woman without the license, insurance. I mean, fly the flying saucer. And she said, yeah, I was. So I said, I was stuck. I said, so how do you fly a flying saucer? She says, oh, you do it with your mind. And then I knew why they'd set me up. Now I have 50 people who have flown the craft. And they'll say to me, like, for example, this Chris Bledsoe, who gave me the message about the Guardians, giving me the message about music. I was talking to him one time. He said, oh, I've flown the craft. And I said, you flew the craft? And he said, yeah. I said, stop, Chris. I'm going to phone you on Skype. I'm going to tape it. I want you to tell me exactly how it works. And I have interviewed United Airlines pilot from San Francisco. I've got a retired UFO colonel from Los Angeles, and Chris. And it's like they're reading off a cue card. It's exactly the same story every time. So Chris says, there's this small object there. I go into this object. There's this pedestal in the middle of the room, and they tell me to put my hand on the pedestal. I put my hand on the pedestal, and it's like a CD-ROM where you can see, he pulls his hand off, you can see where his hand was, and you see these sort of, whatever you'd call it, like light and colors going through. And he says, then suddenly these hexagons start to go, and the whole thing starts to change, and the ship's getting bigger, and these things are getting bigger. And all of a sudden, the front window opens up, and I'm over the Cape Fear River where I was abducted. And I became one with the craft. Everybody says the same thing. You put your hand on a panel, you put it on a ball, you put it on a wall, on a panel on the wall. You become one with the craft. One with the craft. The craft is alive, and whatever you think is what the craft does. Got a guy in Salt Lake City, very heavy Mormon guy. His job was to fly the craft. They asked him, where would you like to go, Ron? He said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. They said, sit in this chair, put your fingers in this thing. He said the chair was like it had been built for him. It was exactly fit him. He put his fingers in there, and he said, they said it's going to be very intense for 1 second. He said it was horribly intense for 1 second. The window opened up, and there was the Milky Way off in the galaxy in 1 second. Whatever you think is what the craft does. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft. So when these experiencers have the craft around, they can tell you, it's here, it's here. You can't see it. They can feel it because they've been one with the craft. They vibrated with the craft, and they know the craft is there. I've got 50 people now who have flown the craft. Nobody has ever said anything different. Even Cat Stevens, the famous musician who wrote and became a Muslim, didn't play, was abducted in the early 1970s. He wrote 2 songs. So I go back and look at his songs. He wrote 2 songs about his abduction experience. One was called Longer Boats. One was called Freezing Steel. This is 1972. He said, I was on the ship of freezing steel, the ship without the guiding wheel. There is no guiding wheel. There's no steering wheel. You fly it with your mind. And what people will report who are experiencers, and this is where you start to see these things. Could not be possibly accidental. So you get people who have near-death experiences, and you take a look at people who've had what is called the abduction experience. All of them will report that when they walk under lights, the lights get turned off, that they can't touch electrical equipment, that they can't wear a watch. And the weirdest thing is people who have had the near-death experience and people who've had the abduction experience, been on board the ship, who have flown the craft, will describe the same thing. The one guy said, I put my hand on the panel, and he said I could suddenly see 360 degrees. Now, it's like the story of flying the craft. If you're going to make up a story about being abducted, you don't want to throw in that I'm flying the craft with my mind stuff, because that's pretty stupid. That's not something that somebody's going to think about. The same thing is I could suddenly see 360 degrees. Near-death experience people will describe that, and abduction people will describe exactly the same thing. So the question is the person having a near-death experience, or are they being abducted? The other weird thing is when you take a look at near-death experience people or abduction people, and there's been a survey done, Edgar Mitchell, who started IONS, did a survey, 3,000 experiencers. Of the people who answered the question, 39% said they had a near-death experience. So of the experiencers, they said, we've had a near-death experience. And they wanted to do a study, and they said, well, this is kind of weird, because they were assuming these are random events. Why would someone have an abduction experience where they have to get grabbed off the street against their will, and then also have a near-death experience? How can there be so many people having the same experience? I said, well, maybe, as my 2017 download experience is, it's not random. It's pattern. And these people are choosing to have these experiences to learn something. So you see these synchronicities. The other synchronicity that is weird is in near-death experience, or in the experience or the UFO experiencers, 50% of them say they were healed. 46% of near-death experience people say they had their experience, they got healed. 50% of abduction people say they can heal people. Ray Hernandez, who helped do the survey with Edgar Mitchell, made a joke. He said, if I had $1 for every person who told me they could do Reiki healing, I'd be a rich man. Like literally everybody in the UFO experience has an experience can do Reiki healing. Oh, yeah, I can heal people. In the near-death experience, it's between 57 and 70% of people who've had a near-death experience suddenly say they can heal people. So the question is this random, or are these people having the same sort of experience? The most bizarre one, I mentioned this guy, this Ron Johnson from Salt Lake City. He had an experience where he was the being. He has 36 out-of-body experiences. He calls them out-of-body experiences. In the one, he's taken by LB, who's the being that he's dealing with, 3 times into the spirit world. He's taken to a lower level spirit world, like Eben Alexander describes, and he's taken twice into the spirit world with his mother. And the third time, he could see his mother. He's walking around with his mother in the spirit world. And he says to me, she takes me to this building that looks like a temple in Nephi, Utah. And she says, Ron, when you die, he's got very, very advanced heart disease. When you die, you're going to come here and you're going to get a room in this building with, I have a room, your father has a room. He shows the father, you can see where the father is, this room. He says, when I go into the building, he says, the weirdest thing, Grant, he said, it was 10 times the size inside as it was outside. And I think to myself, that's what Chris Bledsoe said about the UFO. That's what Terry Lovelace said about the UFO. There's piles of UFO experiencers who will say, I went into the UFO and it was the size of a football field inside. It was just a little tiny craft. And I look outside and it's a little tiny craft. And I look inside, it's the size of a football field. Now, the question is, Ron Johnson's in the spirit world. So is he in the spirit world or is he in a UFO? And you start seeing these crossovers that indicates there's a very close correlation between these two experiences. And the last one is Ron Johnson told me that when he was in this building, his mother showed him a table. And if you've studied Dr. Michael Newton, Life Between Lives, Michael Newton talks about this, that the people who are studying their past lives go into a library and they open up a book, and inside the book, there's a crystal, and they're able to look at their past lives and plan their future lives. So Ron Johnson tells me this alien takes him, and he's in this thing, and his mother takes him, shows him this building, which is 10 times the size inside. They go down to the far end of the building, and he says, there's a table there with these crystals coming out of the table. And he says, I look at the crystals, and she said, when you die, you will have a crystal that comes out of the table, and you will be able to see your entire life and all your lives. And then he said, I see there was a dog, one for my dog. And he said, I looked at my dog's crystal, and I never knew what happened to my dog. He said, I looked at the crystal, and I saw the end of his life, and I saw that the neighbor had shot my dog. And the thing is, the most amazing thing, one high-level intelligence guy said, the most amazing thing he'd ever seen in his time with the UFO field as a government official was the fact that the aliens had a crystal, and that the aliens had shown the past events in the world, and that they'd shown the crucifixion of Jesus to the American government. Now, that was a completely independent story. So you get these 3 independent stories talking about this thing with the crystals. Michael Newton, my friend in the spirit world, and the UFO thing, where you start to realize, like, this has all got to be the same thing. You get these crossovers. And I mentioned already the healer and the healing thing. So you see these very bizarre, in fact, the near-death experience questions were used in the survey that was done with UFO experiencers, and very, very clear connections. Now, here's another one with William Bankston, who's the head of the Society for Scientific Exploration. You see this correlation between healing, energy healing, and the UFO experience. So Bankston, I actually was trained in Chicago. What you do in the Bankston healing is you take 20 ego images, you memorize these images, and you put them in your head, and you flip these images. When I saw that, I said, oh, they're shutting down the left brain. You can't have images, I want to save the world. Bankston says, no, you can't have that image. Take it out of your head. It's got to be an ego image. It's got to be selfish. This is a selfish thing. And what you're doing is you're sending the left brain for coffee. So you memorize these little, I want a new motorhome, I want a new car, I want this, I want that. And you take the images and then you start to memorize them and you start to flip them. And you flip them, and Bankston can flip these at a couple thousand a second. They teach you how to put them on a wheel, you flip these things. And I was in Chicago, I was actually trained for this because I was interested in this whole idea that this is an idea where you're using what they call rapid image cycling. You're taking these images and you're flipping them very, very, very quickly in your head. Now, if you go to the UFO experience, if you've seen the latest documentary called Phenomena, you'll see a story called The Aerial School. This is Rhodesia in 1994. These are a bunch of kids where a UFO lands in front of 62 school kids playing at a recess. One girl is from Hamilton, Canada, and she's with her friend. And she's walking along, and I've tried to interview this, won't let me interview this girl. She's walking around, she tells the story. I'm walking along, I see this flash out of the corner of my eye, and I look, and there's suddenly, they're on these logs. There's the logs along the edge of the playground. They're running on these logs. So they're sort of bouncing up and down as they're running on these logs. And suddenly she says, there's this alien beside her, and it's imitating them. It's sort of bouncing up, but it's levitated, and it's sort of imitating what's going along beside them. And then she said, instantly, boom, the thing was right in front of her. And she says, I was getting these technological images at a very high rate of speed in her head. And these images are flashing in her head. And the girl beside her was getting ecological images that and hers was, you've got technology, but you could do better. And the last one she said was this giant explosion. And she said, that didn't mean to me the world was going to be destroyed. And the girl beside her was getting these ecological images that we were destroying the world, this ecological view. 39% of all people who've been on the ship say they were shown the screen. And if you ask them, have you seen the screen? They don't have to say, oh, yeah, what are you talking about the screen? They know what the screen is. They're forced to watch an image of nuclear devastation, of ecological devastation, these sort of things are shown on the screen. So these kids were shown this. And as soon as I said it, that's rapid image cycling. That's the same thing that Bankston was doing. And the third one was Susie Hansen. Susie Hansen is an experiencer from New Zealand, has written a couple of books called The Dual Soul Connection. She talks about the interaction between the soul and how this works. And she's been given a lot of lessons by the beings over her whole life, how this works. And she talks about this dual soul connection. And at one point, she's starting to talk, and she says, in 2010, they took us to a theater down below. There's 200 people in the theater. And she said, the being came out and stood on the stage. And she said, suddenly there was an image, an ecological image on the screen, and another one, and another one, and another one, another one, another one, another one. And she said, and suddenly there was 100 or more at a time going across the screen. And they had taught us how to do it. And she said the people were crying. There was emotion through the whole place. They were sitting there as these images were flashing on screen. I said, that's rapid image cycling. It's the same story. And it's the same thing that you see. And she said the being just came out and he put his hand like that, and everybody calmed down. Everybody stopped crying. But the images, the ecological images, were still in the people's heads. You'll see a lot of experiencers are vegetarians. They're ecological. They're animal rights people. This is sort of put in their head. Now, to go back to the Bankston thing, I talked to Bankston, and I said to William Bankston when I was being trained, I said, you didn't come up with this. It's called the Bankston method. You didn't come up with this. You got it from Bennett Merrick. Bennett Merrick was a psychic that Bankston, when he was doing his sociology degree, had wondered how could Bennett Merrick go into a hospital and diagnose just by an envelope, people signing their name coming into the hospital, just look at the signature, just look at the envelope the signature was in and tell what was wrong with that person or heal people. And he wanted to figure out how did he do this. And that's where the idea of the rapid image cycling came from. It came from Bennett Merrick. It didn't come from Bankston, which makes sense. If you're a sociology guy, it's not like you're going to say, well, we'll flip 1,000 images in our head in a second and that'll cure cancer. Because Bankston method is the one that claims it can cure cancer. And so it's not something you're going to flip. That's something someone gave you. That's not something you're going to dream up. Flip these images at 1,000. So I was talking to the top healer, and I was saying to her, or in the book. First, I'll mention in the book. In the book, The Energy Cure. If you see at the very end of the book, Bankston says, "Oh, Merrick, he had sort of a rough end of his life. He was actually sort of losing it. He actually thought he was an alien." And he thought that I was an alien that had come with him from Alpha Centauri, and we had come to the Earth to bring the Bankston healing method. And he sort of felt sorry for him. And yet he admitted that when Bennett Merrick died, he started to have interactions with the beings that Bennett Merrick was. So I talked to one of the top healers for the Bankston method. She said, yeah, you didn't know that Bankston had a big UFO encounter? We think he's an alien too. So you see these crossovers between all these modalities, and you start to realize this probably is an accident, that there's a connection. So that's what I look at as these different sort of connections. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over this because this shows where I've sort of separated from the UFO community. I'm just going to show you a different angle of UFOs that you probably think about UFOs as one way. This is the way I see it. The more I look at it, the more I think this ain't going to be ET. This is, as I say, it's going to be way less physical than you think it is. It's going to be way more spiritual than you think it is. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than you think it is, and it will not have a hint of capitalism. And so here's what I think. What I call it the theory of wow, where I think the whole UFO phenomena, all it is messaging. All it is they're trying to get our attention. They're coming in. So I call it the theory of wow. And it comes down to this thing that maybe the universe is an intellectual classroom, that they realized that the children had the matches, that we're about to destroy the world. We've got to get a message across to these people and how we're going to do it. So the grade 1 class comes along and says, well, I think I know what we should do. We should do some UFO sightings. Let's fly some things around and in the sky, and everybody's going to look at them and they're going to go, oh, what's going on here? The key is, John Lennon, for example, had a UFO sighting in August of 1974. It had big marquee light bulbs around the edge of it, and it had a big red light on the top. Now, the question is, do you need big marquee light bulbs around a flying saucer to fly through space? Why do UFOs have lights on them? They have lights so you can see them. They want you to see them. That's why they have lights. They're all, every craft is different. Every craft has different lights on them. They have the lights. We don't have lights on our crafts. We don't have, except for navigation lights. We don't have crafts. So why would they have lights? They want you to see it. They want you to wait. They want you to go, what's going on? They don't want to give you the answer. They want you to think, like, what's going on here? What are these things flying around? And that's the way it works. So you have these things with the Nimitz. If you're familiar with the Nimitz off the coast of California, that thing hovered in the air for a week before they finally picked it up. It was sitting there for a week. Finally, they went and chased it. And then, so they're chasing it. And then the UFO say, ah, great, here they come. Finally, they're picking it up. And then the one, they say, hey, Zogar, go under the water. And they have the one under the water, and it's making all these bubbles. And of course, then they report back, oh, there was an object under the water, it's making these bubbles, and everybody's all excited. And we're still talking about it. And it's like, give it a break. It's a UFO sighting in 2004, 15 years, 16 years ago. Time to get over it. So people are stuck with this sighting thing. They're sort of like entertainment. And people are talking about it still now, and it's made big news, but it has changed the consciousness of the world. Here's a story that's about to break. This is a story that people got very upset because I sort of broke this story. It's, I believe, going to break in Vice magazine on December 2nd. It has to do with a triangle that is caught by an F-18 coming out of the water. It's a USO, underwater UFO to the air. So a USO to a UFO, and there's a submarine. This guy here is the guy who told me the story. It's being broken by another guy, but this guy's on the submarine where this happened. So the submarine's on the surface, this thing comes out, scares the living daylights out of everybody. The sub immediately goes down, it doesn't know what's going on. It's captured on film, and this photograph may have leaked out of the US government. You may see this on December 2nd. This is gonna change the consciousness of the world. If this photo of an F-18 capturing a big triangle coming out of a water beside a US submarine is going to change the consciousness. So this is what they do. They'll come in very close. They'll do this kind of stuff. They want you to go, oh my God, what's going on? They want you to take pictures. They want you to do this kind of stuff. They're just trying to get across the message. The Phoenix Lights is reported. I'm interviewing her on Monday. And this is a craft that went over Phoenix about a couple 100 feet off the ground. It was a mile or 2 miles across. So the question is, if you're a flying saucer, like, why do you need a craft that's two miles across? And why do you need to fly at 100 feet over 100 or 200 feet over Phoenix, Arizona? They wanted everybody to report this. They wanted everybody to go, oh my goodness, what's going on? Same as if people are familiar with experiencers, this is the most famous experience of all. Travis Walton. Travis Walton was abducted for 5 days. And everybody always has these theories in the UFO community. They say, oh, Travis Walton was abducted. They killed him. They zapped him and they killed him and had to bring him back to life. I said, no, you know what they did? They said, oh, let's take a guy for 5 days. That'll really make some news. And if Travis Walton had only been abducted for 2 hours, you never would have heard of the guy. He is the most famous UFO lecturer there is because he was abducted for 5 days. That's what they want. They wanted big news. They wanted everybody to talk about it. And it's not that you can understand. It's just that Travis is telling the story. And it's almost like African-American rights or gay rights or whatever. It doesn't matter how many bad stories you do about it. The more you talk about it, the more consciousness will rise, and people eventually will make the right decision. They will go, oh yeah, as the New York Times did the UFO story 2 years ago, everybody went, yeah, I knew that already. It was like they raised the consciousness, and everybody was not shocked when the story came out. 1895, you talk about UFOs, 1895, 86, 87, California, the Western United States. There was UFOs flying around. There were wooden ships with propellers and big giant lights on them. So where did these things go? I mean, they were there, and they seem to fit the environment that they're in. These things were there, and then that changed to the Foo Fighters of World War II. They flew off the edges of the plane. So it wasn't that they attacked anybody. Everybody was going, what are these things flying along these planes? And both the Germans and the Allied forces had them. Then you had 1947 when the big thing starts. They come in fleets, these fleets, and they're flying around. Everybody reports them like, what's going on here? And you got to remember, this is after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb, which has a big role to play in this thing. That is one of the reasons why they're here, is because everything is one. We think that if we detonate an atomic bomb, it doesn't affect anybody else. And what the beings say clearly to the experiencers is, when you detonate an atomic bomb, you affect the entire universe. That's how they knew. That's why they came at that time. And what we do affects everything else. We believe we're individuals. Like I'll turn on the lights so I want in London, when everybody was turned to turn off the lights so the Germans couldn't find the city. Now we're into this thing of individuality. Don't tell me what to do. But we got to realize that we are one with Gaia. Whatever we do to Gaia affects Gaia. Whatever we do affects the universe. It's all one thing. So in 47, then you have these the green fireballs started in the late 1940s. Suddenly there was these green fireballs, and they're around all the military installations, Hanford, Los Alamos. They're around where all the nuclear missiles were and stuff like that. Then in 1950, you had these things. These are the Adamski Crafts, or the balls. Those things have not been seen since 1950. And it's almost like the beings are turning the pages of a book and say, what's this? What's this? And they keep changing the story, and it just keeps changing. And we think it's always been the same thing. It's been very much different. And so the question is, where are these beings? Where are these crafts? Well, they're on another planet that's 100 years behind us. And at first they're going to send in the ships with the propellers. Then they're going to send in the Foo Fighters. Then they're going to send in the green fireballs. Then they're going to send in and it's almost like they've done this 1,000 times before on different planets. And they're just messaging. That's all they're doing, is they're saying, we're here. You're not alone. And there's more to life than just nuts and bolts and a random universe. This is a case where the aliens actually are waving down to the people. This went on for 35 minutes with a priest and stuff. Very famous case. Here's the aerial schoolyard talk. Why would you land a UFO in a schoolyard with 62 kids? There's actually a book been written. There was one in Australia. There was 300 kids. They landed a UFO in a schoolyard. Didn't do anything. Just sat there. It made this huge story. Everybody's talking about it. And all they're doing is racing cars. They're not doing anything. They just want you to see it. They want you to report it. They want you to take pictures. They want you to talk about it, to realize that we probably aren't alone. In the 1960s, 70s, 80s, people reported windows in crafts. It doesn't happen anymore. People don't report windows in UFOs anymore. This is the Betty and Barney Hill case, the 1961. I always look for red flags. They had hats on. So I said to people, is that not a red flag? What is this? Is Zeta Reticuli Grays? What, they got a baseball team on Zeta Reticuli? Why are they wearing hats? Or when people get abducted, they always ask the experiencer to say, oh, let me ask you a question. Did they probe you? Did it hurt? That's not what I ask them. I say, let me ask you a question. You're on the ship? Yeah. Did the alien have any clothes on? No. Let me ask you, do you have any sex organs? And they go, no, come to think of it, they did. They have a belly button? No. Do they have nipples? No. Don't you think that's kind of strange? They go, yeah, that's kind of strange. And then they say, it's a woman or it's a man. And I go, well, how do you know it was a woman or a man? And he said, exactly like a noetic thing. I don't know. I just know it was a woman. I just know it was a man. And they look exactly the same. So that's the whole thing. Or I'd ask them, I'd say, one of the most famous ones, 1946, husband and wife both had a sighting. And they've been with this being the whole time. I said, let me ask you, did the alien ever get any older? And they go, no, never got any older. But aliens live a long time. They try to justify it. And it never gets any older. And so then I would ask people, I'd say, did you ever ask the alien, are you an alien? And a couple of them did. They said, are you an alien? And they go, no, not really. And then the person would say, well, why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing? And the one woman who's actually going to have a movie made about her case, she said, well, why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing? He said, what do you mean ugly looking gray thing? You ever look in the mirror? You got those big teeth. When you smile, we think you're going to eat us. And this is the whole deal. Like, and they gave her a book to write. They forced her to write a book. She was driving down a road one day, and suddenly she said, there's this 3D screen in the middle of the thing. And she says, what are you doing? I'm driving. I can't look at this. And so she stops the car and she's watching. She says, what are you showing me this stupid screen for? And they said, that's the opening scene to your movie. A lot of experiences will tell. They were told to write books. They're told to go for movies, and they're just trying to get a message. They're trying to get us to realize there's more to life than nuts and bolts. There's this consciousness, there's a spiritual element, and this is where it's coming across. You see shadow people, a lot of people in all sorts of fields, but in the UFO field, people will report shadow people. And Chris Butzo had. I said, Chris, did you see the one with a hat on? He said, yeah, I saw that one. So if you're a shadow person walking around someone's house, scared and living daylights at them, why do you need a hat? Like, why does a shadow person have a hat? It's something more than what people think it is. Same as the men in black. These people encounter UFO experiences, and they tell them to be quiet. And they're always wearing weird clothes, always out of class weird clothes, or they got these hats on or stuff. And the people said they were really weird. They look weird, and they had these weird clothes on and stuff like that. And you start to realize that they want you to tell these stories. They're putting out. There's a guy, the head guy for NASA, who actually claimed that the beings are giving him inventions, medical inventions. One was on the space shuttle. He sold a company for many, many millions of dollars. He said, Grant, you know what? The morning that idea came into my head, that he sold this company and put it on the space shuttle, he said, the morning that idea came into my head, he said, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. Now, if you talk to people, the hooded figure is always the wisdom figure. And I said, could you see its face? He said, no, I couldn't see its face. And nobody can ever see the face. And I said, oh, you should be regressed. You should go to Los Angeles and get regressed by Yvonne Smith and find out what that being wanted to tell you. But he actually claims that he can sit. He has a protocol, a modality where he can get in the field, and he's given material by these beings. And he's putting this in operating rooms. It's all these medical things that he's doing. He's the head guy for NASA. Here's the guy. This is the guy from Israel, just published this book. This happened in Los Angeles, 1982. He lives in Israel now, where the beings came to him, and they basically came again. It's like they come always like different beings. Like he came, they were green beings, like they're great, but they're green. And he said when they left the room, the way they left is they all took hands and they went in a circle, and they started to walk in the circle. I'm like, faster and faster and faster and faster. And he said suddenly they became translucent. You could see through them, and they were lit up like energy beings. And he said all of a sudden the light went into the middle, into a little tiny ball, and he just went boop, and they were gone. And so I say to people, and this happens all the time, that people will report there's an orb in the room, and the being comes out of the orb. So the question is it a flesh and blood being, or is it a ball of light? If it's a ball of light, does it make eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? You start to realize this is a lot less physical than people think it is. They can come into our world, and this is what he was told. I think I got the quote here. No, I don't have the quote. He was actually told, we can come in, we can take whatever bodies we want. We can appear as whatever we want based upon what we want to present to you. You can do the same thing, you just don't know it. So they come in, they come into the physical world. They can become physical, but they can go back into their world, which is not as physical as ours. I'll just quickly show you. This is orbs. This is very big now. I've done some podcasts on orbs on my YouTube channel. There's people all around the world. This phenomena has just taken off. This is at a Buddhist thing with these orbs. This is a guy in Chicago. This is you can see the stairway there, and there's a being on the stairway. Actually, you can't see it that clear on there, but in the close-up, you can actually see it. And he's getting these photographs. There's people all around the world with these beams. That these beams started to appear in 2015. We don't know what it means, but again, it's this weird type, like a trickster phenomena, where they're doing these really weird things. And the question is, why are they doing the weird things? Because if it's not weird, you're not going to pay attention. It's got to be really weird where you go like, boy, that was weird. And you go and tell everybody because it's really weird. Like, you know what? This weird thing happened to me today. So you have these orbs and these people with these beams of light with these orbs flying around. Here's the stairway that he was looking at. Here's the being on the stairway. So this guy's in Chicago. He actually works for Getty Photos. He's a representative for Getty Photos for selling photos. He photographs every night. There's a pile of people around the world who are all taking the same sort of photographs in all different countries, and they've all come to me because they're taking these weird photos. This is from outside of Phoenix. These are beings that she photographed. She photographs every night as well. She's getting these orb things that are coming down, and a lot of people are getting these sort of like streak things where the orb looks like it's coming down a tunnel, different colors. People said, oh, it's just a hair going across the lens. That's what her kid told her. And so she has this one. I said, well, it looks like quite a few hairs going across the lens on that one. And so you get these people. This is actually a woman who's posing. People pose with these things. Crop circles. The question is, why do you do crop circles? This is one that happened where I was. And the thing is, why would you put a crop circle down? Because they want you to go, How the hell did they do that? Even if it's a hoax, it's like, oh my God. And people are getting photographs and they're exchanging photographs and it's just a mystery. It's getting people to go, something weird's going on, and you can believe it, you can not believe it's ET or whatever, but enough people believe, and the consciousness is rising by all these weird shapes that are going. There used to be these, what they call landing traces. When I was in the 70s, what they have these landing traces, they'd land and they'd burn out crop and they'd leave these tripod marks and the ground would be all fried and wouldn't be able to be no water in the earth and stuff like that. That hasn't happened for 25 years. People don't realize it. They're just changing from one thing to another. They say, okay, we're going to stop doing landing traces. Now we're going to do crop circles. And they do crop circles. And everybody just thinks everything's always happening all the time. They don't realize it's this pattern that's repeating itself over and over again. So these landing traces, there's 4,000 of them that were documented. People used to go around and document them and take soil samples and stuff. Hasn't happened for 25 years. Beings, you get the beings. This is the 1950 beings. So it doesn't look like grays to me. Then in 1960, this is the Betty and Barney Hill, 1962. Suddenly the grays appeared, 1962. I maintain there were no, you may get one or two. There was no grays before 1962. It started in 1962. Suddenly the grays are here. And the humanoid type beings go away. Then you get Communion, 1987, most famous one. This book, there was more people that saw this book. If you go to Amazon and you look at the comments, you'll see scores of people who said, when I saw the cover of that book, I knew I had been abducted. They got hundreds of thousands of letters after this book. He was actually told he was going to call it body pain. His wife started a channel in the middle of the night. And she said, no, we will not call it body pain. We shall call it communion, because that's what it is. That's where it came. And I heard that he was told to put that alien picture on the cover as well. And this was a trigger. This was to trigger people to move this story along. Then you had the reptilians. There are no reptilians before 1988. I don't care what anybody says. The reptilians didn't appear till 1988. Now everybody's talking about reptilians like they've been around forever. No, it's like they keep changing the pattern. Ports of manifestation, which goes to everything with psychics or whatever. This is big in the experiential community. I can say to them, they'll say, oh, I had a couple of dreams. I don't think I was abducted. I've had these weird dreams. Then I'll say, oh, let me ask you, anything else weird happen in your life? You ever have anything fall out of the ceiling? Everything disappear, reappear? And they go, oh yeah, can I go to the next room? They come back with this whole collection of stuff that's come falling out of the ceilings. It's just unbelievable. I think it's 67% of all experiencers say they've had things appear out of nowhere or things disappear and reappear. Let's go on. This is the best one that I've seen. This is an report. This came out of a mediumship thing out of Great Britain in the 1990s. This is a girl. If you look at the photo, you can't really see it, but the top right-hand corner is a girl. That's the girl they're dealing with. Her name was Addie. She claimed to have lived in this house where they're doing the seances, and they were in contact with her for a couple of years, and she was giving all sorts of reports. All these things would appear, and they would fall under the table. And at one point, she said, go to the next room. The girl had a dream. She drew this picture of this girl. She says, go to the next room. Do you want to know? They kept saying, what do you look like? What do you look like? She says, go to the next room. And she said, top right, top right. And so they got this on the board, and they went and they said, I don't know what she's looking at. And there's this board, and the girl had drawn this photo, this painting of this girl, the top right of this. She posted on this bulletin board thing. And so they go, oh, is that you? And then the board is going, and it's actually, they actually tape the audio of this happening as the thing's going around the board, and they're spelling out this thing, and it basically says, look under, which means look under the table. And the girl that looks under the table says, oh my God. And this photograph appears, falls from under the table. They pick up this photograph. It's from about 1910 to 1920. I've done a pile of work trying to figure out what this class was in Great Britain. I know the area it was supposed to be. I could not find it. And she said, and again, it's top right. So the top right is her. And they said, is that you, Addie? Is that you? And then the girl that looked under the table said, you're not going to believe it. You should see, I've got photographs of myself as a girl. It's identical. So it's identical. But you see the photograph, you see it's not completely, it's weird. It's got this trickster phenomena, this weird thing where you see the right-hand side is sort of partly missing. And if you look at the back wall, you'll see that the bricks on the far right-hand side, the bricks are clear. And as you go to the left, the bricks disappear. It's like it's been photoshopped. This photo's been photoshopped, and it's a 1910 photograph. They've got this photograph. So that's the kind of thing when you get the report stuff, you get this really weird stuff that really makes you go like, what is going on? And it's whether it's spirits doing it, whether it's aliens doing it. I think it's all the same thing. It's trying to raise the consciousness of everybody to realize there's more to life than the physical universe. And that's why they do these weird things to make you realize. if you see a lot of experiencers will talk about helicopters. So this guy from Great Britain sent me the helicopter, and then he says, "Oh, I got this UFO." And you got the UFO in the helicopter. In the bottom left-hand corner, you see a UFO in the thing. So then he sends me another one with a helicopter, low-flying helicopter, about 100 feet over his head, and a lot of experiencers report, "I had this helicopter next morning over my house, and I think it's the government spying on me." And then I'd say, "Well, let me see the photograph," and you'd find UFOs. I said, "Has anybody got a helicopter, a low-flying helicopter over an experiencer that doesn't have a UFO in it? Is this random, or is this a helicopter, or is this UFOs doing this? What is this?" And you start to realize it's really weird, and they want people to tell the stories like me. They want people to show the photographs and tell how weird this was, that there's a UFO in the helicopter photograph. People will have the triangles. I'm doing a panel on triangles weekend after next with some of the top people in the world. There are more people. Almost every experiencer will say, "You say you've got bodies in marks on your body." They'll go like Chris. I said to him, "You got two triangles on my chest." So why does an alien need to put a triangle? There's a triangle on somebody's arm, a woman. Why would you need to put a triangle on someone's arm? Because they want you to go, "What's going on? This isn't a dream, man. I got that thing on my arm. It would have been a dream, but if it hadn't been that thing on my arm," and they're saying, "No, it's not a dream, man." And they do some really weird things to people. They make little scoop marks. They cut people. They do all these weird things. And it's basically just to say, no, it wasn't a dream. And the one guy actually got really upset. "Why would they do this to me? Why would they do this to me?" And I said, "Well, maybe they were trying to get your attention and you didn't pay attention. So they said, let's do something that he's not going to be able to deny." And so strange disappearances, I'll just go through this. People disappearing, things disappearing. It happens around UFO experiences. It happens in seances. Light language, I actually have these people. Here's a woman who's doing, you'll see automatic writing. Lots of people in the UFO field do automatic writing. This is a woman who won't come public. I know she is. She just puts it on the internet. She's got maybe 50 hits on her videos. I found them. She does this light language stuff. You'll see here she's doing this language. There's also these UFO experiencer people who just sit there and they got books full of stuff where they're writing this alien language. And she says, "I don't know what it is, but my hand just writes." And then she does this thing where you won't be able to, I don't know if you can hear it, but a lot of people do what's called light language, where they start to talk in this very, very weird language. There are people all over the world. They've just started to appear. And then you'll see these orbs flying through the photograph. And she just stands up in front of the camera and she does this light language. I actually was going to put them through MRI machines. There's a Thomas Jefferson University in Pennsylvania. They've actually put a bunch of people in MRI machines. I don't know if you know this. They put people praying, meditating, channeling, meditating, Buddhist monks who can, make their blood pressure go up or down or stop their heart and all this kind of stuff. They put these people in MRI machines to see if there's a pattern. And what they show is, yes, if you're a medium, there's going to be a pattern. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to put these light language people in there to show that these people aren't just making up some weird language, that they're actually talking some sort of alien language. Some of these people can speak 20 different languages. And they said, "Yeah, we'll do it." But they wanted $50,000 plus travel expenses for 10 people to put them into the MRI machines. And I didn't have that kind of money, but we actually were going to try to get these people to try to get to the bottom of the mystery of what's going on here, because these people are all over the place and it's just appeared. The metals, a lot of UFO people chase the metals. I say it's a total waste of time. You don't come across the galaxy in a flying saucer and then pieces start falling off the flying saucer. They're dropping this stuff. They're dropping it on purpose. They've done it since 1947. The first sighting was actually a UFO that exploded and rained metal down on all sorts of people. This is my friend Chris Blatzo, the one with the music book. He said, "No, it's not falling. It's not being pushed out. It's dripping out of the UFO." I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Because it flew over my driveway 11 feet up, and I gathered all the material, and this is actually analyzed via discovery." You see him, and this is the burning tree. I won't get into it. You'll see all these different things appearing around the tree, this mist. You'll see this in same thing as UFO, but you'll see it in seances. You'll see it in all this kind of stuff. Here's the beams. Here's the most of the sites will have metal at them. The big UFO sites, the famous ones, when you go, you find this metal. It's always weird metal. It has strange properties to it. This is 95%. This is in Canada, 95% pure silver, the biggest UFO case in Canada, but has strange properties, silver properties. This is the one that TTSA, all the people are trying to analyze. This is the one that says, it's this bismuth magnesium that usually doesn't go together. It's in these very small layers that have to be put down almost atom by atom. So they're looking at the stuff and saying, there's no way we've got labs that could ever do this kind of stuff. And they're trying to levitate it. And I say, if they're trying to levitate this little piece of metal, they haven't got anything. It sort of proves that they don't. So the people are looking at this metal. It's all over the world. This is the one we got. We found, Destin, I found this one in a file at the University of Arizona in Tucson. This is 1939, came flying out of the sky, red hot, embedded itself in the guy's garden. He dug it up, took it, he to give it to his daughter. She took it to a NASA lab in Tucson, Arizona, 1967. They just said, we have no idea. It's 99% pure nickel and it has this copper core in the middle of it. Other than that, we can't tell you anything. There's nothing comes out of the sky that's that purity of metal. And again, it's just to go, what the heck? How do you do that? Like, what is going on here? That's all they want to do. Cattle mutilations, I always tell people, why did it take the blood out of the cattle? There's never any blood. And I say, because it didn't take the blood out, you wouldn't pay any attention to it. They want you to know. These things are downwind and downstream from nuclear power, accidents, and radioactive stuff. And they want you to know. They want you to take pictures. They want everybody to go, and they want you to share the pictures. They're trying to get a message across. That's all they're doing. And unless you take the blood and you make it really weird and really grotesque, nobody's going to take a picture. You're just going to say, oh, it just happened. It's nothing unusual. Messages. The number one message, this is the I maintain, is oneness. Oneness and love. 54% say oneness is, love is the core to the universe. Oneness is the key message. Burning Tree, this is Chris Butler. This is the story. I'll get by that. UFOs and Nukes, the guy that wrote this book has now come forward and said he's an experiencer. He's written a book on nuclear activity with UFOs. They're very concerned about nuclear stuff. They've shut down nuclear missile silos. They've been around with, there's piles of cases. And I'll just leave it at that, and we can go to questions. So that's what the UFO stuff's all about. I believe it's nothing more than messaging. They don't want you to figure it out. They just want you to figure it out. They want you to think it up, and they want you to come to a conclusion because like a parent or like anybody else, you can't go down and do your kids' homework. The Canadians were actually told, we will step in if there's a nuclear exchange. Other than a nuclear exchange, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices.
That's amazing. Wow. What an amazing amount of information that is. Okay, we've got some raised hands already. We've got some questions, so I'm going to go right ahead and I think it was Alan has had his hand up. Alan S. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I'm trying to unmute you. Alan, can you unmute yourself? Okay. So let's just see. I will.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I really didn't have any particular question. I was just really blown away by the plethora of the diversity of phenomena you all covered, and I'm going to check out some of your books. So great job.
Yeah, I think that's one thing people don't realize is that that there is this connection that, in fact, there's Ray Hernandez who worked on this survey with Edgar Mitchell, actually heard me have a consciousness lecture in Florida, and 2 days later, he had an out-of-body experience where he was taken from his car, and he was actually shown a wheel. This is where the term contact modalities comes from. And he's an IRS attorney. He was pulled out of his car, and he's in this sort of a 3D matrix world or whatever, and they showed him a wheel that was spinning, and the wheel had quantum physics, remote viewing, channeling, UFOs, near-death experiences, all this kind of stuff. And in the middle was consciousness, and the beings were saying, it's all linked to consciousness. You people have to quit parsing it. And that's what happens is people get their own little religion. I remember I used to have, like I do like the channelers, and then the experiencers would say, I'm not a channeler. Don't put me with those channelers. They're full of it. I don't link me with those people. And the message is, no, it's all the same thing. Realizing that there are different levels of different things. So just because you're a medium doesn't mean you're a good medium. There are, like musicians, there are people who are can play music, and then there are prodigies and professional musicians that people are doing at different levels. But it's all the same. I believe the same thing. It's all one thing. In fact, it's all. If consciousness is primary to the universe, it's all consciousness. It's all. We're making the mistake of assuming there's physical world and that it's all One guy said it's all ooly stuff.
Amen. Okay, thanks, Ellen. Anthony Chan.
Hello. Two questions. First one quick. Who's the person who saw the hooded figure and made the space shuttle, or was involved in the creation of the space shuttle? And second question is,
okay, I'll actually give you his name because he may not hear it. Tim Taylor's the guy. He's an engineer for NASA, and he's brought in by the sort of black ops people, and he uses an experience. So as I said, you can do these modalities. So the way he does it is he says, I sleep 8 hours, then I get up, then I actually go to bed for another hour, then I get up, and I don't drink, and he never does alcohol or stuff like that. Then he goes out, he lives in Florida, he goes outside, he gets a big, huge glass of water, and he sits in the sun, and he drinks the water, and the beings start to talk to him. There's a guy at Stanford University who's working on the DNA of the experiencers. He says, I don't know how it works, but I know how to make it work. And he talks about this thing that Edison used to use. He goes through all the problems, he works through all the stuff, he gets all the questions, and then he takes the primary question that he wants answered, he puts it beside the bed. This is a guy who's like a Stanford geneticist. He puts it by the bed. He says, I wake up in the morning and the idea's in my head. So these people are using these modalities, same as it was done with LSD in Silicon Valley. In the Inspired book, I talk about the invention of the computer. And I show you clearly that if it hadn't been for LSD, there would be no computer. The reason that it was invented in California, where all that stuff came from, is because Stanford, and with our Miles Stanford, there was all the LSD experiments going on, and MIT didn't have that going on. So MIT had the money, but they didn't invent the computer. It was invented. And in 1967, when LSD stuff was shut down by Nixon, there was an experiment going on there by, I'm going to forget his name, does the microdosing stuff. Anyway, they were doing it, and what they had was 44 engineers, scientists, and architects who had a problem that they could not solve. And they had an experiment where they put them under LSD, and within minutes, and when they came out of it, within minutes, 40 out of 44 had solved a problem that they couldn't solve. Google, 80% of all people apparently in Google are microdosing. So this idea of using these contact modalities and getting in the field and using this kind of stuff, this is starting to move. That's why I said at the beginning, 56% of philosophers are materialists, but it used to be 100. I mean, this is moving. Consciousness is making its move. I think we're in a state where pretty soon people are not going to be able to deny that this kind of stuff has to be looked at seriously by the scientific community.
That's exciting.
His last name again? Tim K something?
Tim Taylor is his name. He's in a book called, if you want to read about him, he's in a book called American Cosmic. The name they give him there is Tyler D in the book. And in there they talk about what he's done, stuff that he told them. He's one of the insiders. He's one of the guys that knows what's going on. But he basically is out of the loop. He will not. He talked to me in 2013. That's how I know he was before he went private. But you will not get a hold of this guy. He will not talk to you.
Okay, that was supposed to be my short question. Sorry.
You get another question?
Yeah, the other question was, they obviously are creating spectacles, very ostentatious displays for us to grab our attention. And I think this has something to do with the law of one, the raw material, that we're supposed to have some free will to choose whether to believe this or not. Yeah. But the question is, yeah, basically, on one hand, they're so spectacular, and on the other hand, they're not completely obvious, like they're not showing up on Fox and CNN. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that's the whole idea. I said, because people say disclosure, why didn't the aliens just tell us? I said, if they wanted to, they could land on the White House lawn anytime they want and tell us what to do. Same as the government's not disclosing. They're doing this sort of half and half. So they put it out and they pull it back. They put it out and they pull it back. And that's the way you learn. So if that's why I use the example. You cannot, if you do your kid's homework and go and write your kid's exams, your kid will get through school real easy, but when he's in grade 12, he will not know anything past grade 1. You cannot do somebody's homework for them. So what they're doing is they're just trying to lead us. And I'm saying it's not just the aliens. You'll see that in spiritual phenomena, that people are coming across in spiritual phenomena. You'll see it in psychedelic stuff. You'll see it in all sorts of things, that people are coming across that veil. The veil is getting very thin, but all the people on the other side are doing, they're not interfering. They're not giving you stuff. Same as when you go into a seance. They won't, I mean, why don't they just really appear and prove the whole thing? Because that's the whole idea. It's not to prove it. It's to get you to prove it. It's to get you off and move down the road. That's what it's all about, because you've got the free will. So they can't do it for you, but they can drag you along. It's like the breadcrumbs. They're throwing these little breadcrumbs and you go, oh, this is cool. Nice, look at this. And people like me are following the breadcrumbs. And as it moves along, that's why I said with the New York Times article, but when there used to be a story that when the UFO thing was disclosed, that the government was actually working on UFOs, there would be a meltdown of the stock market. The stock market would go down. People would commit suicide. In 2017, they had an article on the front page of the New York Times that said, oh yeah, the government had a UFO program. They admitted they had a UFO program. And what happened? Absolutely nothing, because they had to acclimatize people to the fact. Everybody said, oh yeah, now tell me what's going on. I mean, I know that already. It's like, and that's what they're doing. They're just gradually moving it down the road. And the more we go, the more you realize, like, as I said, like Jill Bolte Taylor talks about this when she had her experience when her brain loses her left brain, and she was a neuroanatomist at Harvard. She said you could not talk about consciousness. You'd lose your professorship. You could not. Now you can talk about consciousness. It's a completely different world. And that's the thing is they move it slowly, or as Max Planck says, ideas do not advance by people admitting that they were wrong. It advances when new people come along and the other people die off. So it came to this idea. Science and ufology and the paranormal advance one funeral at a time. You can go, and I have the files for Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman spent 61 years doing UFOs, and he liked to argue. He liked to debate. He would debate all the big guys at Oxford, all the skeptics and stuff. I went through his files. Let me guarantee you, he debated the top people, SETI people, all the big skeptics around the world, and he never convinced a single person of anything. The skeptics actually went farther in their corner, and he went farther in his corner. You cannot convince people. It's a waste of time with the skeptics. You just put it out and hope that the young people pick it up, and eventually the thing will turn, and everybody's going to realize, almost like with African American rights or gay rights, where everybody said, oh, gays getting married. And then I remember when it came, Dick Cheney, his daughter was gay. I remember when it came, and it was like, oh yeah, let him, we do that already. It's like, and it's like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, oh, now this is cool, you know. It's like, and it was like you could be locked up in the 1950s. You could be arrested in New York City for being gay. And I mean, look what's moved. And so it's a thing where it slowly moves along, and it's not you convince the old guys. You just keep putting the material out as much as you can, and the young people pick it up because they don't have the prejudices. And that's why I believe that aliens abduct young children, because when you're 20, they could care less about you. You've got so much crap in your head. They would need big rubber boots and a big shovel to get deep enough in your head to try to put an idea in there. That's why they grab kids, because they haven't got the prejudices. Once your left brain comes online, when you're 7 or 8, 9 years old, when the ego comes online, you're toast. It's game over. Or Einstein said, you spend up to 25 years old inventing things, and you spend the rest of your life defending what you did.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. Florence Haas, can you unmute yourself? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm Liz, and then Florence.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Can you tell me, please, what it said on that slide about material purchases disappearing, and what that was all about?
It doesn't ring a bell. Can't help you. Sure. Do you remember anything more?
Signs of something going on. And one of the signs was material purchases disappearances.
Oh, that was the idea that a lot of stuff will disappear, like the port idea, where things will disappear, be relocated, and that's the kind of stuff they're doing just to get you to go like. And that happens with ghost material, psychics. That happens around psychics, all this stuff, and that's just to get people. I believe it's in the paranormal world. It's called the trickster phenomenon, where they're doing this really weird stuff and people think, oh, they're just tricksters. They're trying to fool us. And it's like, no, they're trying to get your attention. And unless it's weird, you will not repeat the story. So the weirder it is, it's almost like in the UFO community, there's actually a law. Unless the story is really weird, I don't believe it. If it's not weird enough, the weirder the story, the more true it's going to be. And as I showed those examples where someone says, oh, I was flying the craft with my mind. I mean, if you're going to make up a story, you're not going to make that up. And that's the thing. It's really weird. And that's how they get the message across. And all they're trying to do is get your attention to realize something's wrong.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So now, Florence.
Thank you. I just put a comment in chat that I was having a little trouble catching all the words. You had so many words you were saying so fast. That's all.
Well, it should be on tape. You should be able to watch it again, right? You may even have a
Absolutely.
and the tape usually has a transcript with it.
Oh, thank you.
I talk fast because I have so much material to say. So I always, when I do my podcast, I always say, buckle your seatbelts. We're about to go very, very fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of information.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Florence. Aaron Silverman. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions. One was, you said that we were needing to kind of become more scientific about it, have the scientific community look at things. You mentioned, and one of the problems I think is that people don't really keep their facts straight when they're talking about various UFO incidents. And one of the things you mentioned was the Nimitz encounter, the craft was seen to hover for a week, and all the accounts I've read don't actually say that. They say that they had mysterious radar tracks for quite a long time before they restarted the Aegis radar system. And then
well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it didn't just happen in 5 minutes. It was around for a while. I mean,
yeah,
that's
there were
the
lots
point
of crafts seen over a long period of time, but it wasn't one craft hovering for a week.
No, I didn't mean to assume it's just the one craft. I mean, the point I was making was, that they were around. They were trying to get their attention, and it's like Jacques Vallée said. So they did the whole incident, and when they got chased and all this kind of stuff, and then it went away. And Jacques Vallée says it was a UFO sighting 16 years ago. It's time to get over it. So they made the one thing. It's not like that's a place where they're there all the time. They just wanted to get the attention of the U.S. military. They wanted to make a big display and get them to talk about it and get people to, and plus they're giving a message to the U.S. military that okay, go ahead.
Sorry, and then I had two other questions. One was, what do you think can be done to encourage people to come forward and not be anonymous when they make reports? Because it's very hard to find reports of UFOs that are not either anonymous or, they don't give the location or something like that. So it's very hard to investigate yourself and just kind of to get into the culture, just the idea that you need to give your bearing, you need to give your location, you need to give a timestamp, and then people can go on like flight radar 24, make sure it's not a plane, that kind of thing. And just kind of getting this into the culture, I think is a priority. What do you think of that?
Okay, well, To the Stars is actually working. If you're familiar, you're probably familiar with the group. They've got a super high tech. Actually, a friend of mine designed the first system for them, and I got another friend that's working on it. And what they got is where you can have an app on your cell phone, and they're going to put all the tracks of the planes, and it's like this big supercomputer. They've got some donation of supercomputer money or this thing, and so you can put your sighting in there, and you can actually tell what's in the area at that time. And they have this stuff that can determine, whether a photograph is legit before they stick it in. And so that kind of stuff is going to help people. The only problem we have in the UFO community is people have this idea that there's military people involved, and if you put it in an app, then you suddenly tell the U.S. military who may want to try to shoot this thing down. But there is these apps that are coming out, or there's, I can't really blame people for being anonymous, but I'll guarantee you, I started in 75. There's a lot less anonymous people now than there was in 1975. You don't get laughed at. In 1975, this was considered to be a random phenomena. You only had one sighting. If you said you had two sightings, you're crazy, man, because this is a random event. You just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time at the right place. We now know it, like people who have their whole life followed them around, that people have all sorts of sightings. There are certain areas that are more common. So I think the anonymous thing is not maybe as bad as people think it is. I'll have people, because I do a lot of people I broadcast, I'll have a lot of people who say, no, I don't want to go on a broadcast. But they'll come on with different names and stuff like that, tell their story. But it's not as bad as it used to be. It used to be really bad, where you were afraid to talk about it. Now it's not as bad as it was.
Right. And then the last question that I have is, what do you think about the assertions from TTSA about the idea that the reason for the secrecy is that the phenomenon is actually in control? Because they actually do hint that several times.
Well, the phenomenon is in control. The one guy, his name is Jim Semivan. He's an experiencer. He's the co-director there. He had experience in the 1990s in his bedroom with his wife with the beings. And he was asked by one guy, John Alexander. You probably know John Alexander. had asked, and he was telling John Alexander, and John, of course, always believes the government is not involved. And he said, okay, so who's in charge? And Jim Semivan said, they are. That is absolutely true. They are absolutely in control. Anybody who thinks the government is shooting these things down or is in control of this, they're absolutely, these beings are maybe a million years ahead of us. They're way ahead of us. I believe they're running the show.
Okay. So, I mean, what do you think that means in terms of the way that society is going? I mean, you know, does that mean that, you know, what kind of channels are we being influenced by then?
Influenced by the beings?
Yeah. I mean, if they're in control, how are they controlling us?
Well, they're in control of the situation. So they can appear when they want to appear. They can appear to whoever they want to appear to. They are basically have been doing this thing since 1890. They've been appearing, showing different things, changing their structure, changing their crafts, stuff like that. We're just observers. We're watching this sort of thing. And a lot of people think they know what's going on. But I don't think people know as much as they think. I think that when you get right down to it, like, for example, they asked TTSA, are you working on consciousness? They said, no, we're not. And that is like insane, because Tom DeLonge, if you hear his story from 2016, when he tells the story, he was in the Lockheed skip, and he was talking to the head scientist at Lockheed, and the guy said, how do they fly? How do they get here? He said, oh, I know this. And he said, that's a good idea. What else? He said, I think consciousness is involved. The head scientist at Lockheed said, now you're talking for 45 minutes. That's all the guy wanted to talk about. So the Lockheed knows that consciousness is involved, but TTSA doesn't want to work on it. And that's the problem, is that in here, what I think what people think is that it's nuts and bolts. We're going to grab these little aliens, we're going to put them in cages, and we're going to grab their little flying saucer, take the engine out. We're going to make lots of money from this thing. And I can say nothing could be further from the truth. This thing is consciousness controlled. We have no clue how to do this kind of stuff. And that's where you see the Nimitz thing. They basically were sitting there and they had no idea. Or you see this one that's coming out on December 2nd. They were scared to death. That sub dived. It had no idea. It was totally out of control. They had no idea where this thing was coming from, what it was going to do. It was panic city. They have no control. And that's what these beings are showing, is that they are basically running the show, but all they're doing is displaying. They're not in effect interfering with anybody. They're just trying to get a message across that we are not alone. And then these messages, 39% of experiencers given the message that we're messing around with nuclear weapons, we're destroying the environment, all this kind of stuff. But in terms of the idea that the government is in control of these beings, there's no way. These things are in total control of what's going on, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And it would be the same thing with all sorts of other phenomena, ghost phenomena, all this kind of stuff. The other world, we have no control over what happens in those things. We're just basically observers. I find little ways to get in there, to talk to them, interact with them for a couple seconds, but basically they're in a different world that they can change into a ball of light. They can take on whatever being, whatever figure they want. They can appear. If you take a guy, when you can go from here to outside the Milky Way in 1 second, this is some pretty high tech that this thing is. And I don't believe I think it's going to be way less ET than people think it is. Maybe multidimensional, but I don't think it's going to be straight out ET.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. So Roberto wants to know, hi Roberto, he says, fascinating presentation, thank you so much. What would you say is our homework assignment on consciousness?
Wow. I guess to first of all realize that there's consciousness is primary. There's a lot of good books out there. If you start reading about quantum physics and the problems they have in quantum physics, this idea that, the observer effect and stuff like that, it takes some homework. But if you've got any sort of modality, I mean, you can develop it. The contact modality book talks about all these different modalities. People may think that they can't do this kind of stuff. I didn't think so either, but there are different things. But I think it's the basic lesson that there's a lot that we don't know. And in fact, the message I was given, I was in contact with the field or whatever you want to call it. Basically, what I was told is, you're just an arrogant, ignorant little piece of, fill in the blank. You just think you understand how reality works. You haven't got a clue. And the worst part about it is you don't realize you're an ignorant, arrogant little piece of what. And you just think you understand how reality works, and you haven't got a clue. Now tell me that's not wrong. That's a direct message that I got. And that's what I think the number one thing you got to realize is it's very complex. and that consciousness is, as much as you can read, there's all sorts of books that are now being written on consciousness, or people, the channeling material, the quantum physics material. There's a lot of stuff. Just get up to speed on it. And the more you read, the more you're going to realize that we've been sort of had with this idea that we're random biological robots in a random meaningless universe.
So I've got Roberto. He's unmuted here, the guy who just asked the question.
Yeah.
You want to follow up, Roberto?
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Thanks for the answer too, and for the whole presentation. Tracking what you're saying about quantum physics and quantum field theory. Like part of the assignment is to elevate the awareness of what quantum field theory is and how consciousness relates to that. And earlier on, I was touched with the idea that everything is one, and that love is at the core of that, and it's the action of that. And it seems like so much of us as human beings in this life is trying to grapple with this thing called love, and in an unconditional way, which is the hard part. And I see that's some part of it. And of all my portrayals I've seen of aliens, UFOs, and all this phenomena, it's rare that you see love be expressed in it. And so if any other expressions of love that you've seen and experiences out there.
Well, you'll get the same thing in near-death experiences, this unconditional love. I have experienced it. I've had an experience with it. The problem with the ET thing is it always gets promoted by Hollywood. And in Hollywood, you need separation. So in my 2017 experience, I was given my noetic experience. I'll give you a quick download of what happened. It said to me, is the world made of nuts and bolts? If it is, that's one world. But if it's made out of consciousness, that's a completely different world and completely different rules. Is it one life? If it's one life, that's one world. But if it's multiple lives, everything's going to change. Is it random? If it's random, that's one world. But if it's pattern, that's a completely different world. And so the whole idea is that we have this consciousness, but when you get to the Hollywood, you're going to get into this separation versus oneness, which I say anything that you consider to be evil in the modern world, I say at the basic core of it is going to be the mistaken belief in separation. So when you get Hollywood portraying the UFO story, it's always going to be us versus them, because nobody cares. If you've got a love story, it's not going to sell any tickets. You need the bad aliens, us. We're great Americans. We're going to bring them down. Yeah. We won the day. You need adversarial. You need people sitting on the edge of your seat, and that's why you've got this portrayal with the beings about us versus them. Is because it's been portrayed so much by Hollywood. But the love is you'll find it all over the place, especially in lucid dreaming, especially in near-death experience, and a lot of the people that have encountered the beings on the other side will say they were given the message that love is at the core of the universe. And maybe that's one of the ideas that has to sort of filter out, that I can understand, because it sounds very hokey. Even the idea of oneness, if you've seen the 60-minute thing with the guy does the psilocybin at Johns Hopkins, and he said, it sounded so hokey, this oneness thing. I mean, it's like, it's so hokey. And then he said, and after I did, I go, it's hokey, but it's real. It's like, because he has the experience. And and that's the thing with noetic experiences, is it's hard to explain to people. I say, I can't explain it to you. It's ineffable. You can't explain it unless you've actually had the experience. And that gets it. So Hollywood is telling the story, and in Hollywood, it's always us versus them. That's how you sell tickets.
Yeah, it has to
It's
go
true.
through here.
Yeah, I should say it's a brief follow-up. It's true that Hollywood does a lot of the us versus them sort of thing. It's also a powerful medium of the love story, where two can become one. And I wonder if the model might change in Hollywood to embrace more of the path to oneness is with love. So appreciate
Well,
that.
That's Sherry Wild that I mentioned. She's got a series coming out in Hollywood, and hers has has a lot of scary stuff with her experience. She had some pretty rough times, but it has an end to it. I remember Chris Bledsoe. He was offered $1.5 million to sign the contract. He was offered 2% of gross. They were going to put $80 million in the movie, 4% of royalties. Mel Gibson had seen his story. Mel Gibson wanted to play it. Julia Roberts was going to play in the movie. There was a character who was going to play me in the movie. They had this thing, and they was going to sign the movie. He wouldn't sign it. He said, "I want control of the end of the movie." They said, "Chris, you're a nice guy, but we can't give you control of the end of the movie." He said, "No, the story's going to be called The Message." He was given a message by an angelic being after the beings, 5 years after the being, he met the beings. And they said, "No, we can't do it." And he wouldn't sign the contract. So it went the second. I was talking to him the third round of lawyers. He was offered that kind of money. And at one point, he was offered by Tom DeLonge $200 million of production money for his big story, which is like a 5-year story. And he said, I turned him down because he wanted to do Fear. And he said to me, "Now there's a decision I had to make." I said, "Bravo, man. This guy turned down a lot of money." You've never seen the Chris Bledsoe story because he will not allow them to change the end of the movie. And the end of the movie is the message. He was given this message about oneness and about the fact that we are in trouble, and God and angels and stuff. And I guess they can't figure a way to make money on that, or it's easier just to do the stuff like with the dog, where I was there and the dog is bleeding and there's all these really weird things happening, where they do that kind of stuff. But hopefully it'll move. I mean, it's like the same thing. You know, everything advances one funeral at a time. We've made a lot of gains since I started in 1975. I'll guarantee that.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberto. And Paul, Paul wanted to ask about ayahuasca hallucinogenic experiences.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I just wanted to know what you thought about the alien encounters that people talk about when they take ayahuasca, for example, and how that would tie in, because you've talked about near-death experiences, you've talked about alien encounters, abductions, and so this is just one more modality, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, it appears to me that there's these different levels. For example, when you see the DMT experiences, they see these little tiny elf-type beings, and the odd time, but they're not really often that described. And in the DMT experience, you'll see 25%, and we'll talk about the abduction experience, that they're on a table and they're being examined, the same as the gray thing. And I remember Strassman, most people don't know, Strassman actually did DMT. He's the guy that did the experiments with DMT during the 1990s, and he never made it public that he'd had experience. And that when he had the experience, the beings had come out of a waterfall made of fire. And they had said to him, "Now you see, now you see, now you see." That's why he did the experiment. It's the same thing. They triggered him. He started doing the thing, but they get these little beings. One of my assistants is a girl, a school teacher out of Toronto. She had the ayahuasca experience in Peru. She saw not angelic beings, but sort of energy beings. And they were saying to him, "Come on, Sinead, come with us. We want to show you. Come on." And she was in such trouble in terms of her physical being. She said, "No, I can't come now." So what you'll see is these different levels. It's not like, it's almost like the thing where at every level, there's different types of beings, almost like there's like a million different levels. So if you're doing psilocybin, you're going to have a different experience than if you do DMT. If you have a different experience, if you're doing LSD, you'll have a different experience if you're doing 5-methoxy DMT. It's almost like there's these different levels. You're not going into the same sort of thing. And it shows you the complexity of the world, how complex and how interdimensional the world may be, that each sort of experience takes you to a different type of world, that there may be that many different worlds. But there is a different connection. That's the whole thing where people say, oh, that the DMT is, people are hallucinating or whatever, but you're not going to hallucinate the same being. Everybody's talking about the same being. And it does show with precision. And they're actually at London College. They're actually doing experiments now where they got people in MRI machines. So we're actually making some moves on this thing where they're starting to look at these experiences and these psychedelics, because you can sort of control it's not like an alien where you got to wait for someone to grab you and take you on board the ship. You can actually sort of control this, and you see this phenomenal research being done. And that, I would say, for me, the thing that will change the world is psychedelics. I will say that is moving so fast. The research at Johns Hopkins, at NYU, at London College, UCLA, they're on the leading edge, and that is going to change more than any other modality that I've seen, in terms of realizing that there's a consciousness connection to this thing, and that you can actually duplicate it. You can actually watch the brain. You can actually follow this kind of stuff. I think psychedelics will change the world in the next 20 years.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Okay. Susan Klein. has her hand up. Susan, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, yeah. Thank you, Grant, for this wonderful lecture. I have two questions, but many, many questions. I was an experiencer in 1970 in the High Sierras, and it was witnessed by my boyfriend at the time. And it changed my world. I'm now almost 70, and I've been on a long pathway with this. And one of my questions is, have you ever had an experience with anyone that could contact anyone in any dimension? And in any time. And I'll give you an example. I was watching this movie called Human. It was on YouTube. It's a fabulous, incredible, consciousness-raising movie. And about a week ago, I get a tickle on my head. And what happens is I usually go get my pendulum, and get this, it was Hitler. I've watched movies like Bashar, like a documentary on Bashar, and all of a sudden I get the tickle on my head, and it's Bashar. And it's no, I'm serious. But I've had missing things in my house, and then they get returned. I've had my table be hit. I've been an artist my whole life, and I've had galleries, so I sold other people's art. And sometimes I do art, and I don't do graphics yet. My art is like done with precision. Okay, so so that's what I want to ask you. If you've ever had that kind of experience, because for me, I channel all the time, all day long, and I'm with 11th and 12th dimension. I'm not much lower than 5th dimensional beings, and they're all beings of light. I'm usually with source, but I mean, I just need to know if you've had any kind of experiences with anybody that could contact anyone in any dimension, because I'm able to do that.
Not the any dimension, but in terms of contacting people, yeah, it's a modality that the idea would be that everything leaves an impression. So whether it's Hitler or an alien or whatever, all this stuff is there. If we can build a building in the 3D world, we can build stuff in the spiritual world. So we are creating all that energy there, and so you're tapping into not so much the person, but the person's energy. So you can. Wow. And that's the key thing that I say to the UFO people. I just can't get across them. Let's prove UFOs exist. Let's look for sightings. I go, look, unless you talk to the people like Susan, who are actually talking to these people and actually take them seriously, because what they'll say is, Susan, she just believes she's doing this. I mean, it's just anecdotal. We can't do this. We're scientists. We got nuts and bolts, man. We got to be rational. Look, we got at least all this stuff. You can't prove all this kind of stuff. And I say, when you start talking to the people who are interacting and say, wonder how she's doing this. That's why they looked at Chris Bledsoe. He had such a high level of contact. The government actually came to him and said, how are you doing this? And because they're trying to figure it out too. So that's what I say. You have to, you're an important person that people should be studying you. They should be finding out how you do it. Now, we don't know yet how you do it, but the fact is you're probably doing exactly what you're saying. And if we figure out how you do it, then anybody can do it. But everybody's still stuck in the world of, let's get some metal, let's get some, some UFO sightings and some photographs and stuff. And I go, like, you're just wasting your time. You've got to talk to the people, no matter how weird their story is, that are interacting with whatever the intelligence is. So you're dealing with an intelligence that is not in this dimension, that is not in this reality. And that's the whole point, is that there is stuff out there and there are modalities for getting in. Whatever your, Bashar calls it, whatever your permission slip is, go ahead and do it. If you think it works, do it, because that's your permission slip. That's what gets you in there. And so I think people got to study you. I think you're very important that you're in this field, and there's a lot of people who have that idea where they can do this channeling thing. And that's where the one person says, don't put me with the channelers. And I go, well, why would we not look at the channelers? Let's look at them. And you can give them lie detectors. You can do whatever you want, but at least take them seriously. Because if you look at in the UFO experiencer world, like with you and other people, I don't know if you did the survey, but when they did the survey, they said, they asked a question, and 40% of all experiencers said at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And I say, now, don't you think you should at least talk to these people if this is true, 40% say they knew the answer to everything in the universe, that would tend to indicate that all the answers are in the universe and all you got to do is figure out how to do it. Why would you not talk to these people? Why would you totally ignore these people? But that's what happens in the UFO community, because everybody believes like the UFO community is like the Rodney Dangerfield of science. Everybody doesn't like us. They just laugh at us. We want to be scientific. We want to be analytical. We want to be skeptical because they're so afraid of what people are going to say. And it's like, forget it. Talk to the people who are interacting with whatever this, I call it the intelligence. I really don't know what it is, but there is some sort of intelligence that you and other people are interacting with, and you and others have to be studied to find out how are you doing it? And more importantly, what is the message that you're getting from these people?
Yeah, it's so weird is I found out that Hitler wasn't an Archon. He wasn't a reptilian. He's not a Draco. He's another negative being that exists in possibly who knows what dimension. I mean, I was reading Isis by Madame Blavatsky, and she comes on my channel. I've gotten very good at asking questions and getting answers. I'm a master channeler, but nobody's interviewed me. You're actually my Facebook buddy, but
I'll interview you. I'll interview you. Let's do an interview.
It's funny. I know everyone is capable of this, and yes, consciousness, being in a love and light place, walking in nature. These are things that make a person totally relate to the world in a different way. I don't watch television. I mean, it's like one of the things is I don't let anything influence me. Nothing. And as an artist, I have to do that in order to create, I believe. And things just come to me, just like a musician or a writer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to take up any more time. I just wanted to know if you heard anybody that could do what I'm doing.
No, let's do an interview. And you mentioned artists, like almost all, not all, but a great percentage of experiencers are artists. They're left brain. That's the whole idea. They're not interested so much in the left brain people. They're interested in the right brain people. And so that's a key thing to remember. So let's do an interview.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, we'll be in touch. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, Susan. And Suzanne Tyler wants to know about the religious, specifically about Jesus, I think. You go ahead and ask your question, Jen.
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, Grant. I saw you in San Francisco a few years ago. You're amazing. What I wanted to know is, have any of the people who spoke with the aliens asked the aliens about, let's say, for example, Jesus or a higher power who created the universe?
Yeah. I wouldn't. The one that comes to my mind is a guy. He's actually a musician out of Las Vegas. I can't remember where he lives now. He was interacting with the beings, the grays. And as you know, with the grays, the tall gray is the one that sort of communicates with the person. And he was very upset. He didn't like the grays. He had no use for them. And they actually showed him a formula. There's two people that were shown a formula that they claimed was a cure to cancer. And it was a 3D holographic formula that with these things, they could walk around inside this formula. And just before he was shown that, he was really angry, and he said to the tall gray, he said, "Let me ask you a question. What's your concept of God?" And he said, the tall gray looked at him and he said, "We are one with the one who is all." And he said, "I was so profoundly hit, I had to sit down." He's like,
That's
I couldn't
amazing.
believe it. And so you see that kind of stuff, and people will, talk about this. There is quite a bit. I guess we should write more about it. That was the one. And Bashar, as you know, talks about that. The one is the all are the one, the only four rules of the universe, that kind of stuff. The one, this message comes across repeatedly. It's this key that we're all one thing. Love is the key to the universe, this kind of stuff. It's that main message. And a lot of people, like the near-death experience, will claim that they see religious figures, especially a lot of women, like angel type figures. You'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. And then the people like Chris Bledsoe and this Chris who I'm interviewing will tie it very heavily into God and angels and this sort of stuff. And it's the idea it's your interpretation. Like when you're a lucid dream, it's a very plastic universe. It's a very plastic thing. So you are a creator of what you're seeing in that thing. It doesn't mean you're not seeing it, but it's your relationship. So if East Indian, you'll see one thing, and if you're a Christian, you're going to see something else. It's that very plastic world, which I think most people agree that when you're in the UFO matrix, it's the same thing. Time and space disappears. You're in a sort of a matrix where things are sort of pliable, they're plastic. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry has his hand up. Let me see, Jerry. Let me unmute you. Or actually, you can unmute yourself. Thanks, Jerry.
Okay. Hi. Very enjoyable, Grant. Just want to relate a story that is in our FMBR channeling information having to do with aliens. And in the stuff with regard to both Challenger and Columbia, these are the shuttles that either exploded or burnt, and pretty much the astronauts are telling us that NASA knows pretty much that there are aliens out there, and they're all a lot of the astronauts that go up there encounter them. They encounter one type of form that's called RELF. I think it stands for something with remote alien phenomenon, but they're more like probes, and they report back to whoever their owners are, and just to tell where we are in our situation with regard to the technologies they've given us, etc. And then on the aspect of the atomic bomb and waking up the others to us, in the Challenger, part of the reason that there was so much fuss with regard to that was that the astronauts would tell us that what part of the mission that was even unknown to the astronauts was they were doing stuff with regard to the Star Wars Reagan program. And that program, they're unknown to them experiments that were going on. And there was a message that, well, this shouldn't go on. And before the Challenger blew up, one of the astronauts, Ellison Onizuka, on one of his other Challenger missions, got a message and saw the ghost of Gus Grissom, Chafee White, and one other astronaut. And that message was that you got to get back and tell the guys, don't play this game. And unfortunately, they couldn't. Their astronaut career would have been over if they told about it. And they couldn't tell about it, but they were destined to die in the that whole explosion. But I just thought that was an interesting set of information that goes along with a lot of the stuff that amazing stuff that you're saying, and I really appreciate what message that you're getting across, because we are one. And we are the essence of the I am, and everyone is that. And basically, there is nothing else but the I am, and everything is that same material. And that's what everyone needs to learn. So, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I'll give you two quick stories on NASA, what they know. I have a friend in Salt Lake City. He's a PhD there. He grew up with a guy who ended up working with the medical team with the astronauts. And he went to him, and he's very into UFOs. So he said to the guy, he says, I want to know, do the astronauts see stuff when they're on their missions? And he said, Joe, he said, we grew up together, didn't we? He said, yeah. We're in the Boy Scouts. He said, yeah. We said we'd never lie, right? And Joe says, yeah. Don't ever ask me the question again. And the other one was a guy that was in the Carmen thing, the initial sightings with me. He had Apollo 15 astronaut James Irwin came to Carmen, Manitoba to lecture. And my friend Bob didn't go to the lecture, but my friend rebuilds old World War II planes, Japanese Zeros and stuff, and so did James Irwin. So at the end of the lecture, he says, I want to meet this Diemert guy. And Diemert was the guy who owned the airport and was instructing people where the UFO was flying around and stuff like that. He said, I want to meet this Diemert guy. So he says, Diemert comes over and they're talking planes, World War II planes and stuff like that. And then Bob says, so I'm sitting there in my hangar, and he says, and my wife, Elaine, leaves the building. Says, as soon as she walked out of the door, James leaned over to me and says, Bob, I'm going to tell you something. If you ever repeat it, I'll deny I ever said it. He said, when we landed on the moon, he said an object landed about a mile away from us. And we radioed Houston. We said, Houston, I'd like to take the rover over and go say howdy. And Houston said, stand by. And 30 seconds later, they came back and said, you're to go about your business and pretend it's not there. And he said the thing was still there when they left. And the other story that he told, so you don't know whether to believe the stories. The other story he told was when he was on the moon, they had a moonwalk and they could monitor their hearts. And they had a straw that they would drink out of. And his straw had disabled or was broken or something like that. So he went on this walk on the moon in this huge temperature for 5 hours or 6 hours, and he wasn't getting any water. They knew his heart was starting to have problems and whatever. They didn't say anything to him, and that's part of the story he told Bob. He says, I had my first heart attack because of what happened on the moon, and they didn't tell me. And then years later, James Irwin's wife wrote an article and told the same story, and I went, oh, that's the same story I heard from Bob in 1975. And this is the story about the fact that there was something on the moon. And then James Irwin's daughter, all his kids had the same. They all started with B, and one was, I can't remember, Brett or something was the girl. And there was a photograph that came out of a guy from the Canadian Space Program, a guy that knew the Canadian Space Program. I asked him, where'd you get this from? He would never tell me. And it was a drawing that his daughter had made at 6 years old of James Irwin, Scott on the moon with the lander, and these aliens hiding behind this hill with these antennas. And it was like pretty, so it was pretty specific to me that Apollo 15 may have seen something on the moon.
I have a question coming in from YouTube, which is what was it that, was it you that you mentioned the song Kashmir by Led Zeppelin? What's interesting about that song?
I have never listened to the song. Chris keeps saying, can you please listen to the song? It has to do with, Led Zeppelin had never been to Kashmir. They were asked, why did you write a song about Kashmir? You've never been there. It had, and then the head guy, there's these guys that are known as the guys that run the Weird Desk. There's a guy at the CIA that's supposed to brief the president. The guy that presently runs it, his name is Ron Pandolfi. His wife is the one that claims that there's a portal. She comes over, she goes through this portal. Ron is actually described, I got him on camera actually talking, and he's the highest level guy that we think in the government that is involved with UFOs. His daughter's name is Kashmir. And so you have these bizarre things, but I never listened to the song. The one with After the Gold Rush, if you look at the lyrics in the song, Neil Young says, I'm in a bombed up basement, and the silver seeds are coming down, the flying saucers, and taking the chosen ones to another planet. And the chosen ones are known by Yvonne Smith, who's the regressionist in Los Angeles. I actually wrote an intro to her book. She calls the experiencers the chosen ones, because there was always the idea that experiencers were random. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time. Now we know they're the chosen. And if you regress everybody back to when they were born, and I asked the girl, Kathy Martin, who is runs the big group from MUFON for the experiences. I say, Kathy, what's this thing about soul contract? Because everybody says, oh, these evil aliens are grabbing people. And then the idea is like, no, maybe you agreed to come onto the world to be an experiencer to get across this message. So I said, Kathy, what do you think about the soul contract idea that these people have agreed? Because I asked some of the regressionists, I said, if you regress somebody back to they're very young and say, at any point in the past, did you agree to be an experiencer? How many people will say yes? And the experiencers, the regressionists would say, oh, 100% of people will say that. So I asked Kathy Martin, I said, Kathy, what do you think about the soul contract idea? That people are coming in and choosing to be experiencers to carry this message, that they were aliens in the last lifetime, and that they're working with the aliens, and they're working together on this thing to raise the consciousness of the world. She said, I always wondered about that question, she said. So I had myself regressed, and I actually heard the words come out of my mouth. I agreed to this.
Well, that was actually, Janet wanted to know, can anyone see UFOs, or is it certain people who are attuned?
You can get in situations where, like in these Mission Rama groups, where you go there where they can bring these things in, or Stephen Greer has CE5s. But basically, the real heavy experiences, like Chris Bledsoe's filming every night. This guy, Chris from Hollywood, he's filming every night. You get certain people who have tremendous numbers of experiences, tremendous numbers of accounts, like this Ron Johnson, 30. I said, have you written them all down? And I always encourage the experiencers to write it down for your children. To document this, because some people have lost jobs. There's a woman who was a reporter in Texas who lost her job when she broke the Stevensville, Texas case. It was a big case. And then they heard her talking to the Dallas Morning News. They thought she was applying for a job. They fired her. And she basically never got a job again as a reporter after that. And I said to her, you may have lost everything you've got because you've covered this UFO story, but 500 years from now, your great-great-great-great-granddaughter will say, that was my great-grandmother that did that, and I'm proud of her. So I always say to people, if you've got part of this story, this is going to be like living at the time of Jesus, that we were the first to figure this thing out. So I implore people to write the story down, their encounters with this thing. But it is not as random as people think it is. That's the download I got. Is this a random world, or is it a pattern world? And the idea is the download I got was said, not only have you got everything wrong, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. Is it oneness? It is a separation. Is it one life, multiple lives? Is it consciousness is nuts and bolts? We think it's one thing. It's exactly the opposite of what we think it is.
Yeah. If you right. A lot of us feel like we're living in a very upside down world right now. Right. And yeah. A couple of people mentioned they really have problems with the cattle mutilations. Like, what's the purpose behind sort of this violent, grotesque? I don't know. It seems.
Well, okay, I make some comments. And this is just my opinion. I mean, there's a guy, and his name's going to escape me. There's three experts on cattle mutilations. The one guy maintained that if you take the cancer map in the Western United States and you put it down and you put the areas with the cattle mutilation, you will get a direct match. He says that all cattle mutilations are downwind and downstream from nuclear power. If you take a look at lots in Colorado, you had the detonation of the above ground detonation of atomic bombs. We have this massive contamination. If you take a look at cattle that are mutilated, you will not see cattle mutilated in a feedlot. Why? Because they're eating corn. They could care less. They want free-ranging cows. They're eating the grass. So a lot of people believe this is a government monitoring operation. Whatever it is, it's a monitoring operation. They're grabbing cattle that are eating. And the other thing that people don't realize, there has been no cattle mutilations for years. There was a couple in Washington, but in 1975, when I started, there were so many cattle mutilations that they had people with guns out on their thing, and anything that flew over, they were shooting it. They were shooting at everything. It was just massive numbers of cattle mutilations. So that's the whole thing. And then there's this idea of the message that like I always say, like Linda Howe is the main one. I always say, Linda, so why did they take the cow? So you grab the cow and you take it in the craft, you mutilate the cow, and then you come back and you go back into the war zone and you drop it right in the farmer's yard. Now, why do you not take the cow, make it evaporate, throw it in outer space, put it in the ocean or whatever? Why do you take it back and drop it right from 100 feet? They drop this thing from 100 feet up. So it lands in and it embeds the cow into the ground. Why would you do this very dramatic thing and drop the cow in the front yard of the farmer? Because they want everybody to know about it. They could take the cow. They don't have to bring the cow back. They've got the cow. Why would you take, they're taking the very soft tissues. So you're taking the rectum and you're taking the tongue, you're taking all these things that are the easiest to detect if you've got, a lot of people used to think it was a mad cow disease, that people were checking for mad cow disease. So you're not going to, you're going to grab cows to try to figure out, you're not going to tell people we're looking for mad cow disease. We want to check your cows. So you do it surreptitiously, but I don't think the government would take that kind of chance. I think it's messaging, and it's also this idea that it only happened sort of in the Western United States where we did the nuclear test. And the one guy maintained that it's all contamination, that the areas that these cattle mutilations are occurring on, like you don't really get them west of the Rockies, you get them east of the Rockies. No, west, you get them east of the Rockies, not west of the Rockies. And it's basically in that contaminated area where most of the cattle mutilations took place. And they do this bizarre thing of dropping the cow right where everybody's going to see it when they don't have to do it. And they take the blood out, which makes no sense whatsoever. Why would you do these? Or the one they had, Linda Howe talks about, they took a heart out of a cow without an incision. So the heart is 9 by 11. So what is everybody going to think? Like, how did they get the cow? How did they get the heart out of the cow? It's these weird things where you're going like, how did they do that? How did they? And it's this weird trickster phenomena thing. So it's a bunch of different messages, but I think it's much more a message. Like Linda Howe said, oh, the cattle mutilations are still going on. They're going on in Argentina. So the way you look at it is you say, well, why would we suddenly have a bunch of cattle mutilations in Argentina? We should go to Argentina and see what they're doing. There's going to be a connection to something, I can guarantee you. It's not evil aliens don't need to do it. And if they're doing it, why did they stop doing it? If they needed the cow material for babies or whatever people think they're doing, why did they suddenly stop it? And why did it only start in 1967? It starts in 67 and it ended in about 2000. Between then, it didn't happen before, it didn't happen after. And there's a pattern. It's to figure out what does that pattern mean.
Okay, so I think you've sort of touched on this. It says, Carol wants to know, do you think they're here to help us? What is
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're just
I believe
consciousness.
I believe that the majority of phenomena we're dealing with, whether it's dead people coming back or whatever, it's all altruistic. And that's where I say, people will say, well, why would they come back and help? Because when you get out of this 3D world, it's all altruistic. It's like a beehive. People say they're like bees. It's a hive mentality. And it's like, yeah, it is. You put in what you can contribute. You take out only what you need. It is a hive mentality. That's the way it works. When you get to higher levels of reality, it's all about making the world a better place. It's about realizing that we are like cells in a human body. There's 80 trillion cells that all do exactly what they're supposed to do. That's why I say there is no capitalism. When you get a cell that says, to heck with you, I will do whatever I want, I will continue to duplicate. We call that a cancer cell. When the cells are all doing, that's what the way it works in higher reality, is that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. Everybody's just being one. Or people will say, I'm not coming back to the earth. I said, you're coming back to the earth. Come on. What are you going to do? You're going to sit there in bliss and drink Mai Tais for eternity? Like, come on. I mean, that's what it's about, is you come back. That's what the universe is about. You're given a being so that you can make the world bigger, better. It's the one expressing itself. But it comes down to making the world. It's only in the Western world where we get this idea that we are individuals, separation. We are individuals, and we are here to rape, pillage, kill, and steal. And that's the mistake, is the mistaken belief in separation. We believe that we're here to rape and pillage, when in fact we are not. We're here to make the world a better place and to work as one, like cells, like bees in a hive, that when you destroy the hive, all the bees know exactly what to do. It's working as one. That's how the universe works. We've just got some idea that it works a different way, and that's not how it works.
So I have 3 more questions.
Yep.
Do you have a sense of what the beings think about COVID? Deborah wants to know.
Well, I don't know what they think. I've got a very strong opinion. I just basically say COVID is I call it the oneness virus. It is exactly the idea of oneness versus separation. And the analogy you use is during World War II in London, people were told turn off the lights because there was no radar. The only way the Germans could find London and bomb it was to find the lights. So everybody turned out the lights. Now it's like we're in a different world. It's not oneness. It's not the society that is to be saved. So London is, we're all going to save everybody. So turn off the lights. Now it's like, don't tell me to turn off the lights. I am an individual. I'll do whatever the hell I want to do. Don't you tell me what. And what you have is like the human body, that when you get 80 trillion cells all doing individual stuff, going in their own direction, the body's going to get sick. So you can see situations like South Korea, where they've got 51 million people and they've only got 200 deaths. We've got 6 areas in Canada where we have less than 6 deaths. And the idea is, do you protect the one? Do you protect the society the way they did in China? So in China, when that thing happened, they shut it down. You could not move, because once you got targeted as being on a list, as being in contact, you could not move because your cell phone was tagged. You could not go through a guard. You could not move, and they shut it down. And they say, well, let's go with their civil rights. Yes, they absolutely did. The one took precedence over the individual. The same as in Australia. I just heard from my friend, a good friend of mine in Australia today, where they had it going wild and they shut it down for 30 days, shut everything down. He said they have not had a case for weeks. So everybody's dealt the evil Chinese virus. It's not the cards that are dealt to you. It's how you play the cards. In a reincarnation world, if it's one world, then that's one world. But if it's a multiple world, everything is experienced. Everything is experienced. So you get dealt the card, you don't get dealt the card. It's all experience in a reincarnation world. There's no good, there's no bad. It's how you play the cards. So whatever your complaint is, it's a terrible world. Just remember, I choose, you chose to be here at this time and in this place, in this mess. And perhaps you came to this mess because you're supposed to do something. That's the whole idea of this download thing, is the mistaken belief in separation. I'm an individual and that I can do whatever I want. And I can, if I've got 50 foot of frontage on the Hudson River, I'm going to dump all my chemicals in the river. Don't tell me what to do. If I happen to find a way to get every fish out of the sea, I will take every fish out of the sea. If I can chop the last tree down, don't you tell me what to do. That's the way the world is working today, is this idea of individuality. And that is like 80 trillion cancer cells in the human body, everybody doing their own thing.
Yeah, it's individuality without any sense of responsibility to everyone else, right? To the whole.
Yeah, the key is the one. You have to, you put in what you can contribute to the one, and you take out only what you need. And people hate it because that's socialism. And that was why the experiences in the 1950s were followed around, because they thought they were all communists. Because that is the message. It's that idea that the one, the individual, the Gaia, the universe, that the one is to be protected. It's you contribute what you can. And this idea of taking care of the poor, I call it the Jesus socialist rant in Matthew 25. Take care of the people in prison, the poor, and the sick. And if you don't, Jesus says, I will cast you into the fire that I reserve for Satan and his angels. I can't believe how people can understand the idea that you should try to take care of people who don't have. It's fine to get what you want, but the idea that we're going to just rape and pillage and we really don't care what happens to the world. I'm going to be dead when it's all gone. I really don't care what happens. And the idea that we're doing this is this idea of ego. It's the whole idea of shutting down the left brain. Shut down the ego, shut down the individual, the one that believes it's separate. Once you shut down the ego, you realize, like in psychedelics, like in near-death experience, you suddenly go, oh my God, everything's alive, everything's one, and everything's conscious. Everybody says the same thing. It's the left brain that says, no, I'm an ego. Don't tell me, I'm individual, and that's all just made up. Once you shut the left brain, the ego down, and it's the death of the ego, then you realize you are one with the universe.
Fantastic. Okay. At the very beginning, you mentioned a guy named Peterson. I think that first slide,
Peters. Yeah, Chris Peters.
Lorian wants to know if he had a near-death experience.
I don't think so. No, I don't. Okay. He's had some weird experiences, but no.
Okay, last question. And so from JC. Jacques Vallée said human beings are under the control of a strange force that bends them in absurd ways, forcing them to play a role in a bizarre game of deception. What do you think he meant by this?
Well, he's got the fear thing. He's bringing in the fear thing, that they have less than good intentions. I agree with him up to that point. And I used to think Jacques Vallée was nuts, because Jacques Vallée said, I'd be very surprised if this turns out to be extraterrestrials visiting from another planet. I used to think, man, it's nuts. Come on, it's obviously aliens from another planet. And now the more I look, the more I realize that he's probably right. But that's when you bring in the fear thing. I don't really believe the fear thing because that's when the ego says, I'm separate from you. You're the bad guy. I'm the good guy. That sort of stuff. Fear, I don't believe it. If you look at Jill Bolte Taylor, who had the near-death experience where her left brain is shut down, she said it was like the remote went off, the left brain shut down, the voice shut off, and there was no fear and there was no judgment. When the left brain came back online, when the hemorrhage was taken out, those things came back. And that's when she said to her left brain, okay, you can complain and all you want from 9:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock in the morning till 9:30, and 9:30 at 9 till 9:30 at night. For the rest of the time, I need you to shut up. I don't want to listen to you. And she says she can actually control that. So that fear thing, she says, is left brain. That's ego. The ego wants to be protected. It says, oh, I got to be protected. And once you shut the ego down, the fear goes away. And I don't believe fear is really a thing. I don't see I see a world of experience where you make your fear, you can create things that are fearful, but it's the left brain, it's the ego that's creating the fear.
Okay, so just two quick, what is the name of the group in Mount Shasta?
That's the Mission Rama group.
Mission Rama, R-A-M-A?
R-A-H-M-A, sometimes the H is not in there, but Mission Rama group. They're around the world. They had an experience in 1974 with automatic writing, where the claim was it was an alien. They said, "How do you know you're an alien?" And they said, "Come out to the Chilka Mountain on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. We'll be there." And that's when they got this thing where they could actually get the craft to appear at a certain place at a certain time. And they are now 25,000 around the world. And they do meditations. They do almost like in seances. They do singing. In there, they do meditations. They do mantras. And what they're trying to do is raise the vibration. And their idea is that the aliens lower their vibration and they meet in between, and that's how they do it.
Stephen Greer is doing that also with the meditation and stuff now.
But the Mission Rama group is sort of like C5, Stephen Greer on steroids. They can not only tell you that something's going to appear, they'll tell you. And when I had my experience, there's two people. They call them antennas, and these are like you get somebody who's got can pick up, and if they get two people with the same message, they'll take it as a legitimate message. The message they got was 9:33. The event would take place at 9:33. This thing started to flash over my head. I didn't know till later it was 9:33, but they can predict to the minute when the object will appear, not only where, but to the minute when it'll appear.
That's amazing. Okay, so you mentioned that you have some things coming up on December 2nd. You're doing an interview with
December 2nd, there's an article coming out. I believe it's in Vice magazine. This is a disclosure. This is a story that they got upset that we sort of scooped them on it. This is a story that a U.S. Air Force F-18 captured a triangle coming out of the water in one of the oceans with a sub beside it. And the photograph, I believe, will be part of the article. So this is going to be one of these things where everybody's going to go, "Oh, this is for real. This is absolutely for real." And we're doing an interview with all the major people who've had triangle sightings around the world. So we have two panels on the 5th and the 6th. My White House, my YouTube channel is Grant Cameron White House UFO. So you'll see there I've got the UFO stuff, but I've got a lot of near-death experience people I talk to, channelers, all this kind of stuff. So we will run that thing with the two panels. And these are people who've had triangle sighting, like the big Phoenix light sighting. We have the girl, the doctor that was involved there. I will be in San Francisco, I believe, in March at a conference there in March. And we've all been sort of shut down by COVID. So most of my stuff happens on the White House UFO YouTube channel. And I put maybe 3 things up a week, but a lot of it is consciousness related stuff now.
That's excellent. Okay, so that's your YouTube channel and your website.
I don't really have a website. I send people to my Facebook, which is Presidential UFO, where I post a lot of stuff daily on there.
Okay, awesome. I think I got all of the questions, and thank you so much. This is just like a fire hose of information. It's fantastic.
Hopefully we can do it again. And I appreciate what you're doing, because you're doing what I'm doing. Is you're doing this thing of raising consciousness. All you can do is put out what you've got, get as much exposure as you can, and almost like let the universe take care of it. You've been given a message to do, a mission, and you just do your mission. And that's why I say to people, I always end with this. I say, people always worry about about the other guy. All you have to do is, if it's a multiple life universe, all you have to do is realize, I came into this world probably for a reason. I planned it. I planned to do some stuff. And when I come out, I'm a big Michael Newton fan. Michael Newton, who did the Life Between Lives. You only get asked one question. How did it work out? All the world's a stage. All the men and women are but actors. They have their entrances and their exits, and every man plays many roles. You and I both chose to come into the world to do something. And when we come out, they're going to ask us, how did it work out? All we have to do is figure out, why did we come here? And are we doing what we came here to do? Nothing else matters. What other people matter, what the government, nothing matters. All that matters is, why did I come here, and what am I supposed to be doing?
I just love the synchronicity, because I'm just finishing up Michael Newton's book right now.
Wow.
I happen to be in the middle of reading that book. So yes, thank you so much. And I think, we're here to raise the vibration, right? To really kind of embody love, not as an emotion, but as a frequency, right? To really kind of bring the frequency of love, which is the source vibration. That's what I think. But anyway, thank you so much. Really, really wonderful. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate all of the questions. Thank you everyone for being with us. Check out Grant's YouTube channel and his Facebook page, and ours. Our YouTube channel is FMBR TV, and our website is fmbr.org. So everyone stay healthy, stay well, and have a great weekend. Thank you, Grant.
Beautiful. Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate it.